Chapter 408. The glaring fire burned the night sky, and shrill screams spread out in the night. There were flashing police lights on both sides of the road, and dense figures were everywhere. The firemen were busy putting out the flames. Black smoke billowed up. The luxurious and exquisite manor in the past had become ruins. Bloody corpses were scattered randomly on the ground and were carried away by doctors and nurses in white. In the cold and murderous atmosphere, Jiang Chenyin, a master on the holy list with the code name Black Hand in the Dark World, looked at the scene with a gloomy face and did not speak for a long time. The fat policeman stood beside Jiang Chenyin with a serious face and kept asking questions. A large number of weapons, even a lot of heavy weapons, were found in the ruined manor, and the assailant attacked the place with the fastest speed and the most violent means. Everything was short. It was hard to say whether it was a battle or a massacre. In less than 3 minutes, dense gunshots boiled in the night, and the roar of bombs rang through half of the city. Blood spurted out in the chaos. One by one, the elites of the Jiang family of South America were destroyed and torn apart by absolute violence. When the fire rose into the sky, the battle was over. This scene suddenly made the local police feel like they were facing a formidable enemy. Coming to the manor with the police were the middle-level heads of the National Security Department. They were standing in front of Jiang Chenyin and asking him all the questions they thought could lead to clues. For example, the origin of the weapons in the manor. For example, the motive of the Jiang family of South America to stay here. For example, whether Jiang Chenyin had offended anyone. Maybe it was the Snow Country Mafia who raided the manor. Jiang Chenyin frowned tightly. His body was no longer trembling, but the irritation and disgust between his eyebrows could not be concealed. Finally, when the fat police chief proposed that Jiang Chenyin must give an explanation, Jiang Chenyin could not bear it any longer. He pulled his fat body over and kicked the middle-level official of the National Security Department away. "Don't mess with me, fat pig. I'm a guest here, not a prisoner. I hope you know your duties." Jiang Chenyin held back his killing intent, slowly put down the policeman and said coldly, "Now take your men and get out." All the policemen nearby were in an uproar. The director, who was no longer young, coughed a few times with difficulty. Just as he was about to order the thugs in front of him to be arrested with a furious face, a group of mysterious people in black suits had entered the scene. There were a total of 8 men in black suits surrounding a middle-aged man in sportswear. The middle-aged man glanced at the embarrassed police chief, frowned slightly, and waved his hand casually. The police chief, who was considered a powerful figure in the city, didn't dare to say a word. He couldn't care less about his dignity. He smiled apologetically and began to retreat. At the same time, he took all the policemen nearby with him. "I'm sorry." The middle-aged man walked up to Jiang Chenyin and touched his big nose helplessly. "It happened so suddenly that I couldn't help here. Mr. Jiang, I hope we can get your understanding." Jiang Chenyin managed to control his expression. His eyes softened a little and he said calmly, "It doesn't matter. It's just a pity to destroy the manor you like, Mr. Rekvia. I will compensate you for your loss." Rekvia is not a name. In Eastern Europe, it was an absolutely prominent surname, representing a top wealthy family in Eastern Europe. Perhaps in the whole of Europe, the Rekvia family was not as powerful as the Morton family and the Violet family. But at least in the land of Eastern Europe, Rekvia's authority would not be worse than anyone else's. It was the largest and even the only wealthy family in Wulan State. In Wulan State, the second largest country in Europe, Rekvia was almost synonymous with supremacy. After the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, the superpowers of the Dark World entered Eastern Europe one after another. Some found partners on the spot after entering Eastern Europe. Some dark forces already had partners before they entered Eastern Europe. The Rekvia family was the most powerful ally of the Jiang family of South America in Eastern Europe. Therefore, a considerable part of the elites of the Jiang family of South America were concentrated in Wulan State. There were nearly 800 elites in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State alone. This manor was the place provided by the Rekvia family to the Jiang family of South America to settle their own people. Nearly 200 elites all lived here. This group of people just entered Wulan State 2 days ago. They didn't even play their strength in the chaos of Eastern Europe. Because of the raid tonight, they were all wiped out. The most important thing was, within the Jiang family of South America, these 200 people were the direct descendants of Jiang Chenyin. It's just a property. It's nothing. The current patriarch of the Rekvia family smiled calmly, then narrowed his eyes and said, "It's just that I'm curious about who dares to come to Reki City to be the enemy of the Rekvia family. Mr. Jiang, do you have any clues?" This raid seemed to be a coincidence and deliberate. Jiang Qinyan was supposed to go to the Rekvia family's dinner today, but when he was still on the way, the manor was attacked. What was more embarrassing was that Jiang Qinyan set off from here to attend the dinner. When the attack happened, Jiang Qinyan had just left here for less than 20 minutes. It's people from Zhongzhou State. Jiang Qinyan gritted his teeth and said with cold eyes, Sai City. Sai City was a world-famous city of assassins. The way of assassins was not always deceitful. Especially for the strong, the top assassins were as calm and domineering as anyone else. When Tribulation drove out of Reki City, Situt Sangyue had been standing at their original place and waiting for a long time. In the thick night, she was dressed in a white dress, and her long hair was blown by the wind. In a trance, she was like a shadow. Tribulation parked the car beside her. Situt Sangyue sat in the car and was silent. The car started again. In the car, which was neither fast nor slow, Tribulation suddenly coughed violently. The cough was dull and hoarse. The frequency was not fast, but it was deep, as if it was heart-wrenching. I'll drive, Situt Sangyue said. Tribulation shook his head, waved his hand and reluctantly said, no need. He coughed for a while, straightened up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and was silent for a long time. There was an accident tonight. After a long time, Tribulation said softly. Situt Sangyue, who had been looking at her brother's face, said nothing more. Tonight, the division of labor between the two was very clear. Situt Sangyue's goal was a manor in the south of Reki City, while Tribulation's goal was a club in the north of the city. Situt Sangyue's move of useless heaven and earth almost completely wiped out the entire manor. After completing the task, she waited for a long time before seeing Tribulation come. Needless to say, she knew that there was an accident tonight. Can you control your injuries or not? Situt Sangyue asked, frowning tightly. Tribulation was the only invincible realm killer in the dark world today. Many people knew about this. But few people knew that since he broke through in Heaven Capital, Tribulation's injury had never healed. From the chi-controlling realm to the ice-condensing realm, fire-flaming realm, thunder-shocking realm, and straight into the invincible realm, this road of martial arts was steep and fierce to the extreme. Tribulation proved the feasibility of this road and its strength. Tribulation was very strong now. He had reached the end of this road. If he didn't care about his injury, Tribulation's real combat capability would be far better than Situt Sangyue's. It was entirely possible for him to be ranked in the top 10 of the Divine List, or even close to the top 5 of the Divine List. Not to mention the top 5 of the Divine List. As long as he entered the Divine List, Tribulation could be regarded as the only invincible realm killer in the dark world in the past 100 years to enter the Divine List. But Tribulation's breakthrough was too intense, and the injury left was so serious that it could hardly be healed. It had been more than 3 years since the final battle of Heaven Capital, but Tribulation, who had terrifying combat capability, had not succeeded in stabilizing his realm. His realm went up and down, and sometimes it would fall from the invincible realm. Not to mention his own feelings, Situt Sangyue, as his elder sister, was frightened. Tribulation was indeed very strong now, but the strength he could exert now was at most equivalent to the strength before he broke through, or even slightly worse. His injury and body had completely limited his strength. Such a breakthrough was even worse than not breaking through at all. There is still a chance. Tribulation said blandly, the Jade Seal is still in my hands. The Jade Seal, Situt Sangyue sneered and said, without the Jade Seal that Tianlan gave you, it is unknown whether you can live until now. Judging from your current injury, the Jade Seal can only save your life at most. Tribulation fell silent. I'll think about it. After a long time, he slowly opened his mouth. It's time to make up your mind. At your current age, you still have a chance. Situt Sangyue said. Tribulation did not speak. He knew what it meant to make up his mind. His current problem was difficult to solve, but in essence it was actually very simple. The power of the invincible realm was very strong. But he went straight from the chi-controlling realm to the invincible realm. This kind of breakthrough was too intense. Although he was lucky to succeed, the huge power of the invincible realm had almost crushed Tribulation's body. Simply speaking, his current body, because of the injury, could not bear the power of the invincible realm at all. And as long as this power was still there, his injury could not be healed. This matter was difficult to solve, or it was difficult to solve it perfectly. At present, the only possibility was that Tribulation chose to lower his realm by himself. If this word was used on other people, it might be barely acceptable. But how cruel it was to be used on Tribulation. Other invincible realm experts would at least be a half-step invincible realm expert if they lowered their realm. If Tribulation chose to leave the invincible realm, he did not enter the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, or the thunder-shocking realm. Once he lowered his realm, he would be in the chi-controlling realm. Who could accept this fact? In any case, I have to delay the final battle in Snow Country. Tribulation said softly, before the final battle, I'll try to do as little as possible. In my current state, there are not many opportunities for me to take action. I'll try to use them at the critical moment. Situ Tsangyue said, yes, we did our duty to deal with the Jiang family of South America tonight and give Zhongzhou State an explanation. What's your plan next? Do it according to the original plan. Tribulation said, go to Snow Country. Situ Tsangyue glanced at him. Tribulation seemed to realize something and changed his words. Go to Mormons and meet her. Mormons was a city in Snow Country. To go to Mormons was to go to Snow Country. But Tribulation's tone was calm, as if he was emphasizing something. Don't you want to have a look? Situ Tsangyue was silent for a while and suddenly asked. Tribulation's eyes calmly looked straight at the road ahead in the night. The scenery on both sides of the road quickly went backward in the advance of the vehicles. The car kept speeding up. Tribulation's voice was calm and without any fluctuation. What's there to see? If you want to see, it's naturally good. I don't want to see. Don't want to see? I don't want to see. There was a sudden silence in the car. Only the sound of the engine was roaring. In just a few words, the car had unconsciously reached its limit in Tribulation's hands. She has helped you a lot. Situ Tsangyue said calmly, when you went up from the chi-controlling realm, you encountered a lot of problems. If she hadn't helped you solve the most critical problem, you might have been stuck there. I saved her life. Tribulation said briefly, that was her reward for me. That was the only mission you failed. If you hadn't fallen in love with her, how could you have given up the mission to save her? Situ Tsangyue chuckled. The corners of Tribulation's mouth twitched slightly, and his eyes were cold and hard. Go and have a look. Situ Tsangyue expressed her position. I want to have a look too. I don't want to see it. Tribulation suddenly smiled. It's meaningless. She is not her. There's no need to see it. She is not her. Situ Tsangyue's eyes were a little dazed. Well, he is not him. She and him. We're not him. If we can see each other again, Situ Tsangyue laughed at herself. If we can see each other again, it would be best if we are not enemies. Tribulation whispered. This sentence was very clear. Because it was clear, it was cruel. It would be best if they were not enemies. If there were enemies who could not distinguish life and death, what was the meaning of the word best? Tribulation looked ahead. His eyes were dazed and calm. Trance and calmness were constantly alternating. The corners of his mouth were raised and his smile was a little complicated. You are not reconciled. Situ Tsangyue said calmly. So what if I am not reconciled? Tribulation whispered, when she was still a holy punishment priest, I couldn't take her away. What can I do now? In fact, I understood that I had the power to take her away, but I didn't have that kind of will. She wouldn't go with me. I'm an assassin and she's a priest. Now I'm a highness among killers, and she's the Holy Virgin of the Vatican. When we parted that year, we knew very well that she could only be the Holy Virgin and would never be Mrs. Situ. So in the darkness of that year, the young man named Situ Wanjia was most thoroughly immersed in the killing of the Dark Shadow. He became a pure tribulation. Whether willing or not, there would be many firsts in life. Many firsts might be against one's will, but strictly speaking it was not difficult. Because there was no choice. But it was the most difficult to repeat life without choice. The afterglow of the polar sun was getting dimmer. Under the soft sunlight, Lishi stood in front of the window of the Jelly Country Hotel, looking at the bustling scene outside, and her eyes became more and more dull. She was afraid of the repetition of fate and choices. But the purpose of her trip was to repeat. She repeatedly killed one person, killed two people. She repeatedly killed people she didn't want to kill. She repeatedly killed people she had killed but didn't kill. This feeling was very torturous. But after suffering became a habit, it became numb and ignorant coldness and exhaustion. Exhaustion became eagerness. She wanted to end all eagerness. As long as it was over. No matter how it ended, it didn't matter. As long as it was over. In the sunny night, Lishi turned around and took out her mobile phone to make a call. The phone was quickly connected. A calm and cautious voice sounded. Hello. This is Lishi. Lishi held the phone and spoke in a brief tone. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Lishi had been silent for so long that everyone outside Kunlun City seemed to have forgotten her existence. After a long time, the voice on the phone sounded again. "Hello, madam, where are you now?" "I'm at the Oga Hotel. I like it here very much. You don't have to pick me up," Li Shi said calmly. The man on the phone was silent again for a while and then whispered, "Okay, madam." Li Shi held the phone quietly and was silent for a long time before she said flatly, "Is there any news from the Purgatory of Heaven capital? We are currently investigating, but it is certain that Daybreak of the Purgatory of Heaven capital has entered Eastern Europe, but we are still unable to determine deity's whereabouts." On the phone, the man's voice was cautious. "Keep investigating," Li Shi said lightly. "In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the only thing you need to do is to determine the whereabouts of deity of the Purgatory of Heaven capital." "Okay," the man responded calmly. Li Shi hung up the phone in silence and sat on the bed. The bed was very soft. However, an even more obvious fatigue engulfed her like a tide, bringing with it a suffocating sense of oppression. Li Shi closed her eyes and fell on the bed. She didn't want to be sorry to the Li family. But in the end, she stabbed him in the heart and the key point of the entire Li family. She didn't want to help Gu Xingyun now. But because of Li Qingqing, she had to come to Eastern Europe. She had been silent for most of her life. But when she needed to do something, fate would always push her body and push her in the opposite direction of her will. She had long been tired of such a life and spurned the world. So this time she obeyed Gu Xingyun's orders, but she did not intend to completely obey Gu Xingyun's orders. The sky in Kunlun City was too cold. Gu Xingyun's face was too disgusting. In the icy and snowy Eastern Europe, she really had the idea to end all this. She couldn't resist Gu Xingyun. But she didn't intend to fight for the interests of Kunlun City in Eastern Europe. In this cold but quiet place, if she could drag the man who she didn't know was called deity or Li Kuangtu to go with her. For her, that was the best ending. Eastern Europe. At 2 o'clock in the middle of the night, a flight from Jianghu State to Snow Country landed smoothly at the capital airport after a connecting flight from Snow Country to Im. The capital airport had been completely under martial law a day ago. All flights had stopped operating. The martial law had lasted from the early morning of the previous day to the present. The entire Im officials seemed to be quietly waiting for the landing of the special plane. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining, the new commander of the Arctic Ocean Command of Jianghu State, stood in the airport in a military uniform. He stood tall and straight and was calm and composed, surrounded by a group of senior officials of Im. The Im officials attached great importance to the pickup. Not only did they agree that the order of the airport would be maintained by the Jianghu State garrison, but they also sent Im's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, Trace, to lead a large team that was comparable to the Foreign Investigation Team to meet them in person. The huge plane was taxiing on the runway and the roar was getting closer and closer. Cheng Huaining glanced at the plane, glanced at Im's Foreign Affairs Minister Trace beside him and said with a smile, "His Highness, they are transferring from Snow Country. There are some problems in Snow Country which delayed some time. Mr. Prime Minister, if there is no accident this time when His Highness goes back, maybe Jianghu State will consider establishing a direct route from Jianghu State to Im. At that time, please support us, Mr. Prime Minister." A direct route from Jianghu State to Im. Terence was stunned, and then he was ecstatic. He nodded and said, of course, I will support it. General Cheng, I personally yearn for Jianghu State. I am also willing to urge the government to strengthen the bilateral relationship between Im and Jianghu State." Cheng Huaining nodded with a smile. Once the direct route from Jianghu State to Im was established, Jianghu State would benefit, but the government of Im would benefit the most. Had no reason not to agree. The support he mentioned was undoubtedly not the support of the route, but the position and performance of Im in the chaos in Eastern Europe. Some time ago, the president of Im personally met Jiang Chenyin of the Jiang family of South America. Now, although he was still friendly to Jianghu State, people with discerning eyes could see that his attitude had gradually wavered. Cheng Huaining had just arrived at the Arctic Ocean Command, so he naturally did not want to see this happen. Im was one of the garrisons of the Arctic Ocean Command. If he switched sides to the Jiang family of South America, it would not only be trouble for him but also lose his face. The plane slowly stopped. The cabin opened. The gangway was lowered. In the silence, one after another, officers of the Special Warfare System of Jianghu State in military uniforms got off the plane. The dark green military uniforms occupied the vision of a large number of senior officials of Im. Cheng Huaining subconsciously straightened his body. A large number of senior officials from both military and political sides of Im also widened their eyes. They all knew a name. That name now meant the strongest among the younger generation in the Dark World. Everyone wanted to see the demeanor of the young chosen one. Officers appeared one after another. Some were tough, some were quiet, some were calm, and some were wild. Terence, the official leader of IM, was dazzled. A young man in the same military uniform finally came out of the cabin. Terence glanced at him casually and ignored him. He was still looking for the legendary young marshal of Jianghu State. Cheng Huaining straightened his body at the first time. Salute. Near the airport, all the garrison troops of Jianghu State stood at attention and saluted at the same time. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining of the Arctic Ocean Command of Jianghu State pays respect to Your Highness. Cheng Huaining's steady and loud voice resounded through the entire airport. Terence was startled, and his eyes subconsciously shifted to the young man. Then he shifted. Then he shifted back. He was a young man who couldn't be any more ordinary. Although the marshal's military uniform was very conspicuous, but it always made people unable to help but ignore his existence. He was standing there clearly, but it gave people the feeling that he didn't notice him at all. The young man slowly went down the gangway and raised his hand to salute back. As he walked, he was like a transparent shadow that was illusory, indistinct, and calm and collected. But the moment he raised his hand, the entire airport suddenly became incomparably real. He stood there quietly and saluted back. But the illusory feeling of being ignored just now completely disappeared. The lights of the airport shone on his military uniform and rank. The light was boundless. General Ning. Li Tianlan put down his arm, held Cheng Huaining's hand and said with a chuckle, "Thank you for your hard work." It was late at night on August 7th in Eastern Europe. Under the attention of all the dark forces in the world, the Snowdance Corps of Jianghu State came. The light of the polar sun was getting dimmer and dimmer. The sun was gradually falling. In the manner of Mormons, Qin Weibai, who had returned from Bayou State, was wearing a coat and standing quietly at the top of the villa, looking at the flowers blooming all over the manor. The flowers were in full bloom in violation of the season and the temperature. There were thousands of colors and vitality everywhere. Qin Weibai looked at them quietly, expressionless. "It's actually very beautiful. Although it's a little messy, it's much better than before." Lin Fengting's voice sounded beside Qin Weibai with a smile. "You don't like it?" "I hate being deceived," Qin Weibai said softly. A scapegoat was not a scapegoat. What she left for Li Tianlan was a mortal love. When she returned to the manor and saw the flowers in the garden, Qin Weibai already understood what had happened. But Xian Xuanzi had gone far away after doing all this. As for the two senior brothers, according to Xian Xuanzi, they were all traveling and couldn't be contacted. Thus, this life force was firmly stuck here and could no longer be erased. Only when you are alive can you be qualified to hate something. Lin Fengting said softly, "This is good, really good." "Maybe." Qin Weibai took a deep breath and said softly, "Shen Yuan's sword is already on its way to Eastern Europe. In order to avoid attracting attention, they will come in batches. They will all arrive in Mormons in about a week." "What's your arrangement?" Lin Fengting asked. Qin Weibai thought for a moment, shook her head slowly and said, "No, just stay here." "Stay here?" Lin Fengting was a little stunned. Qin Weibai said yes. "The chaos in Eastern Europe." Lin Fengting frowned. "In the end of the chaos, there must be a final battle." Qin Weibai said softly, "No matter where we fight, the final battle can only be in Mormons, not anywhere else. In the outsider's impression, the Samsara Palace has been destroyed. I will wait for them here and give everyone a surprise." She looked at Lin Fengting. "Sir, you seem to have forgotten that I said this would be the place of the final battle." "Here?" Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai. "What's special here?" "In the whole of Eastern Europe, this is the most special place." Qin Weibai laughed. "Sir, you can think of this as a base set up by the Samsara Palace here. The Samsara Palace owns more than a manor in Mormons, but some things can't be seen until the final battle." Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai for a long time before he nodded. "I'll wait and see." Qin Weibai didn't speak. She just looked up at the polar sun in the sky. The polar sun slowly sank and finally disappeared completely from sight. There was no day and night in the polar sun. The sun would rise again the moment it set. But today, however, the setting sun did not appear after it set. Before the lights of Mormons came on, the polar sun disappeared. The thick and deep night enveloped the whole world in an instant. A pale green light suddenly lit up in the dark sky, which was as silent as a grave. The light danced in the sky, reflecting the entire night sky with incomparable brilliance. That was the most beautiful spectacle in the world. The polar night aurora. The temperature of Mormons was dropping. The wind was dancing wildly in the darkness. The cold wind blew over and messed up Qin Weibai's long hair that was tied up. She stood quietly, but her hair suddenly flew under the laser, extremely presumptuous. Qin Weibai raised her head and still stared at the night high in the sky. The aurora in the sky kept flickering in her eyes. Only the darkness grew deeper. The everlasting night officially arrived. Chapter 409. In a capitalist country, power could block a lot of things, but it could not block the media. In Europe, perhaps not all media companies had the status of a giant, but any super tycoon would definitely have extraordinary power in the media field. So when a group of middle-level and high-level officers of the Snowdance Corps walked out of IM Airport, the cameras of countless media were flashing. The dark green military uniform that appeared in IM seemed to have become a picture full of power, which was transmitted to all corners of Eastern Europe in the fastest time. Li Tianlong. This name, which had just appeared on the stage of the Dark World, was still strange to most people. Perhaps the deepest impression he left on the Dark World was his decisiveness in breaking into the invincible realm in the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, and his amazing sword in the maneuver of the 2 academies of Jianghu State not long ago. Most people might not know what this young marshal of Jianghu State meant. But without accurate cognition, it did not mean that he would be ignored. A young marshal full of vigor and sharpness at a young age, and an elite special warfare battalion with a luxurious lineup, this force was no less than anyone in Eastern Europe. No one would ignore them and no one dared to ignore them. The northernmost part of Snow Country had ushered in the polar night. The ink-like darkness enveloped Vasilis Cathedral. The lights in the church were almost dazzling and looked particularly brilliant in the night. The polar day and the polar night alternated. The daylight disappeared late at night. Darkness enveloped the morning. When the brilliant aurora in the sky slowly dissipated, the whole world seemed to become dead silent. The Holy Virgin of the Vatican Angel stood on the bell tower of the church and watched the light filling the night gradually disappear. She slowly turned around and looked at the TV screen on the indoor wall. Eastern European news was playing on the screen. For all of Eastern Europe, this was a new TV channel. It was a new news channel set up by Daqin International Media in Eastern Europe about a month ago. Daqin International was in Bayou State. However, the Eastern European News Channel gathered the major events of all the countries in Eastern Europe and broadcast them in the news. In the chaotic land full of interests, blood, power, and beliefs, the Eastern European News Channel had undoubtedly become a sharp sword in the hands of the Qin family in Bayou country. On the TV screen, the dignified and elegant host was telling about a mysterious attack that took place in Reki city of Wulan State an hour ago. The fire in the live video was still not extinguished. The chaotic lights and the crowd kept moving in the flickering. The doctors and nurses of Reki City kept carrying the bodies onto the stretchers. The beautiful manor had become ruins. The camera kept shaking. Intentionally or unintentionally, Jiang Qinyan's gloomy face and Rekvia's face appeared in the camera for a moment. Angel watched in silence. The presenter's voice in the news was soft and low, with a bit of solemnity and compassion. It sounded emotional, but after listening to it for a long time, it always sounded routine. The scene in the news changed, and the sky above the capital of IM appeared. Compared with the solemnity of Wulan State, IM in the picture was only majestic. The dark green military uniforms and military ranks of Jianghu State appeared on the TV screen, but all of them had the same back view. They were silent, resolute, and had a sense of forbearance and strength. There was a row of black cars lined up in front of the airport. Countless soldiers of Jianghu State got into the cars. The vehicles, like a long line, started slowly. From beginning to end, the faces of these soldiers were never photographed. Angel was not sure what this meant. Compared with Jiang Qinyan's face that appeared in the camera intentionally or unintentionally in Wulan State, the backs of Jianghu State soldiers were somewhat meaningful. Was this the position and attitude that the Eastern European news had not clearly expressed? Behind the Eastern European news was the Qin family of Bayou State. The Qin family, which was close to the Qin clan. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, the position of the Qin family was definitely one of the things that attracted the most attention. Angel wasn't sure if the news was telling the truth. It was the Jiang family of South America that was attacked in Wulan State. Angel looked at the ending news screen, thought for a moment, and then slowly said, "Obviously." A soft but somewhat evil voice sounded. "I talked to Jiang Qinyan on the phone. It was the 2 highnesses of Sai City in Jianghu State who attacked. Not only the manor on TV, but also another club in Reki City where the elites of the Jiang family of South America were placed suffered heavy losses. This is the revenge of Jianghu State. Not far from Angel sat a very quiet man. A man with a unique temperament. His appearance was between that of a young man and a middle-aged man, and his figure was slightly thin. He seemed to be handsome but also very ordinary. The light shone on him. His smile was quiet and calm, but his face was a little blurred. He was the chief knight of Knights Templars. In the dark world, his identity was the master of Knights Templars, an invincible realm expert. Chaos. Angel glanced at him. Hearing the two highnesses of Sai City, her eyes were a little complicated. But when her eyes fell on Chaos, her eyes had become calm. You don't seem to be worried? Angel asked. Chaos looked at the face behind the veil, which was even blurrier than his. His eyes were gentle and humble, but behind this facade, there was a scorching heat that could burn everything. Chaos looked at him for a long time. He bowed slightly and said calmly, I don't know what your Highness Holy Virgin means. The status of the chief knight of Knights Templars was very high in the dark world. But the entire Knights Templars was a vassal institution of the Vatican. Its position within the Vatican was even lower than that of the bishops, the saint warriors, and the holy punishment priests. Strictly speaking, it was not an institution that could sit in front of the Holy Virgin. He could sit in front of Angel calmly because he was an invincible realm expert. That was all. You know very well. Angel looked into Chaos's eyes. You know that this is the revenge of Jianghu State. Your Excellency, what reason do you have to think that Jianghu State will only retaliate against the Jiang family of South America and let Knights Templars go? You joined hands with the Jiang family of South America and killed not only the elites of Samsara Palace, but also the garrison of Jianghu State. This is very stupid. Should I congratulate you for attracting the attention of Jianghu State? Chaos was silent for a while. After a long time he slowly said, I didn't slaughter the garrison of Jianghu State. Angel nodded. Sounds like it's true. But does anyone believe it? She looked at Chaos coldly. I don't believe it. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Chaos shook his head. No means no. I will explain it to Jianghu State. They believe it and then the two have nothing to do with each other. They don't believe it. Knights Templars has never been afraid of war since its establishment. I will also shoulder my responsibilities. Your Highness Holy Virgin can rest assured that the victory in the chaos of Eastern Europe belongs to the Vatican and Knights Templars. I appreciate a lot of qualities. Angel's tone was cold. But I don't appreciate arrogance. Your Excellency, your courage is commendable, but your stupidity is equally surprising. You are not afraid of war, but from the standpoint of the Vatican at this stage, neither the Vatican nor Knights Templars should attract the attention of Jianghu State. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, Jianghu State has not only the two highnesses of Sai City, but also a more terrifying majesty, a younger highness, and an entire special warfare battalion. In the face of such power, what is Knights Templars? Chaos narrowed his eyes, lowered his head, and remained silent. You said you didn't slaughter the garrison of Jianghu State. Angel took a deep breath, stood up, and said slowly, I don't believe it. No one believes it. But I can give you 3 days. Within 3 days, come up with a reason that everyone can believe. Your Excellency, I'll wait for your news. It was a long time. In the oppressive silence, Chaos also stood up. You don't want to provoke Jianghu State. He looked at Angel. Is it because of fear? Angel pointed to the door with a poker face and said blandly, no matter what, this is my order. Chaos twitched the corner of his mouth and nodded. I will try my best. He turned around and strode out of the bell tower. Angel looked at his back. His back was very straight and fearless. Fearlessness was precious, but sometimes, it seemed extremely arrogant. Angel turned around and looked out of the window. The everlasting night outside the window was getting darker and darker. The sun had fallen and it would not rise for a long time. Angel looked at it quietly and muttered to herself, the arrogant will pay the price. Outside the bell tower, Chaos, who had walked out of the bell tower, was also looking at the light inside the bell tower and whispered, the coward will lose everything. Was a small country. With an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers, it was even less than the smallest province in Jianghu State. Not to mention the whole world, even in Europe or even limited to Eastern Europe, was not eye-catching. In the past 100 years, this was a country that had always been in a state of ups and downs, and it was also one of the small countries with the most frequent civil strife in Eastern Europe. At the most chaotic time, had 12 governments in 10 years, which was simply dazzling. This situation lasted until Jianghu State gave assistance. After Jianghu State helped Im, the chaos slowly calmed down. At that time, at the delicate moment when the major forces in Eastern Europe checked and balanced each other and did not want to easily intervene in the chaos of Im, the assistance of Jianghu State was thunderous. The first army that appeared in Im was about 8,000 people, not many but they were famous. After the troop codenamed Desolate Border returned to Jianghu State, they really went to Desolate Border, which was the predecessor of today's Border Control Corps. At that time it was Li Honghe, the state-protecting war god of Jianghu State, and Li Guangtu, the two highnesses who personally led the troops to support Im. The father and son stood in Im, faced the various means of many Eastern European forces, and finally nailed the garrison near the capital of Im. At that time, this was the first garrison of Jianghu State stationed in Eastern Europe. Later, Jianghu State used the Im garrison as a starting point and spent several years slowly building the Arctic Ocean Command that deterred the whole of Eastern Europe. So when it came to Im, the Li family and Jianghu State, there were too many soul-stirring, heartwarming or blood-boiling stories in between. Li Tianlan now led the Snowdance Corps to Im. When he thought about it carefully, it seemed that it was really a bit predestined. Perhaps because he knew all the stories of that year, Li Tianlan had been silent since he walked out of the airport. The motorcade entered the capital from the airport in silence, and then entered the garrison camp of Jianghu State. Terence, the deputy prime minister of Im and the foreign minister, had already confirmed the itinerary of the president and the prime minister. After booking the welcome dinner tomorrow evening, he left. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining, the former commander of the Black Dragon Army of the Border Control Corps and the current commander of the Arctic Ocean Command, invited Li Tianlan to his study and said that he wanted to report on work. The logistics director of the Arctic Ocean Command began to arrange accommodation for the officers of the Snowdance Corps. After the attack, Jianghu State was furious, and the number of garrison troops in Im continued to increase. Now there were nearly 20,000 troops of Jianghu State stationed in Im. The exact number was 19,832. There were nearly 20,000 people in the garrison camp, but no one in the camp belonged to the garrison of the Arctic Ocean Command. At this time, it was the entire Snowdance Corps that was stationed in Im. The ordinary soldiers of the Snowdance Corps had entered Eastern Europe in batches before the high-level list was confirmed. As soon as the officers were in place today, the entire Snowdance Corps had begun to operate. Li Tianlan didn't care about the 9 officers. It took a process for the officers in the army to get familiar with each other, even if they were all elites. He followed Cheng Huaining to the study in silence. He sat down in silence. Cheng Huaining turned on the TV without saying a word and watched the recently popular Eastern European news channel. The two of them sat on the sofa, ignoring each other without even a cup of tea. Cheng Huaining took out a cigarette and lit it. He didn't give it to Li Tianlan. He crossed his legs and watched the TV with relish. Li Tianlan sat there in silence, motionless and silent. Less than 5 minutes passed. There was a knock on the door slowly, neither fast nor slow. Cheng Huaining frowned and said loudly, "Come in, please." The door was pushed open. A slender and somewhat effeminate man walked in slowly with a peaceful smile. "Vice Marshal Qin?" Cheng Huaining stood up with a smile and shook hands with the effeminate man. Li Tianlan still didn't move. Qin Qingwan, the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps, walked into the study. A trace of displeasure flashed through his heart, but he didn't show it. He also knew that it was a little abrupt and unsightly for him to come over. But he was the vice marshal of the Snowdance Corps. In addition to the responsibilities given to him by Jianghu State, he also had other tasks. Cheng Huaining and Li Tianlan. Both of their positions were very sensitive. He had to know what they talked about and what arrangements they had so that he could play a role in the next action. Li Tianlan gave him the cold shoulder so he could only put up with it. "Your Highness, General Cheng, what are you talking about?" Qin Qingwan asked with a smile. "We're just watching TV. We didn't talk about anything." Cheng Huaining smiled and asked Qin Qingwan to sit down. Qin Qingwan rolled his eyes and glanced at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan still sat in that position. In a trance, his figure seemed to shake slightly and become more and more illusory. Qin Qingwan suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and tentatively called, "Your Highness?" Cheng Huaining smiled but didn't say anything. He looked at Qin Qingwan with a well-concealed mockery in his eyes. Qin Qingwan's face changed. He suddenly walked over and reached out, as if to put his hand on Li Tianlan's shoulder intimately. His palm fell but he touched nothing. His palm passed through Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan's figure shook in the study and then disappeared completely. Qin Qinghuan froze and turned to look at Cheng Huaining. At this moment he vaguely seemed to understand why he hadn't seen the legendary bodyguard beside Li Tianlan since he got off the plane. Because he didn't see the two deputy commanders of the Snowdance Corps, let alone the two sword masters of Mount Shu. "What are you thinking about, Vice Marshal Qin?" Cheng Huaining asked with a smile and pointed to the TV. "Watch the news." In the news, the dignified and beautiful host was telling about a mysterious attack in Reki City, the capital of Wulan State. Cheng Huaining was watching the news. Jiang Qinyan was also watching the news. The Eastern European news channel was really popular. At least the superpowers in Eastern Europe were paying close attention to this channel every day. The losses after the attack tonight had been sorted out as quickly as possible. The manor plus the club. Situt Songyue and Tribulation attacked at the same time. Less than 80 of the 400 elites survived. Nearly half of the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City were lost. This result made Jiang Qinyan lose all his good mood, but he didn't know who to vent his anger on. He brought the remaining 70 or so elites with him. The Rekvia family had rearranged a manor for him. Back in the manor, Jiang Qinyan stared absent-mindedly at the Eastern European news on TV. His eyes were cold and he wondered if he should report the loss to his elder brother. In the news screen, the faces of Jiang Qinyan and Schenker, the current patriarch of Rekvia, flashed in the picture. Soon after, the news skipped, and the backs of Im and the Snowdance Corps appeared. Was the backs? Jiang Qinyan snorted heavily and muttered to himself, "The Qin family." He took out his cell phone and was about to dial when the doorbell suddenly rang. Jiang Qinyan frowned and picked up the intercom device beside him. "What's the matter?" "Second Master, Mr. Schenker is visiting. He has entered the manor." Schenker Rekvia. Jiang Qinyan froze. He had no reason not to pay attention to his strongest ally in Eastern Europe. He put down the phone, stood up and said, "I'll go down and pick it up." He quickly went downstairs. When he walked out of the main villa, he could already see the lights of a row of motorcades. The motorcade stopped in front of the villa. Schenker, the patriarch of the Rekvia family who had just parted with Jiang Qinyan, got out of the car with a smile and shook hands with Jiang Qinyan. "Mr. Jiang, the Snowdance Corps has entered Eastern Europe." Schenker chuckled. "I know." Jiang Qinyan nodded. "But there is one thing you may not know. In the sequence of the Snowdance Corps entering Im, there are very few heavyweight experts missing. At present we can't determine their, Jiang Qinyan." Before Schenker finished speaking, a flat voice suddenly sounded. The voice was so far away and so real as if it were close to the ear, clear and calm. There were only 3 words in the title. But as the word Nian fell, the whole night sky shook. Jiang Qinyan. Jiang Qinyan. Jiang Qinyan. The empty night seemed to suddenly become a mountain wall, and the clear and empty voice kept echoing in the night. Schenker's words disappeared in Jiang Qinyan's ears. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the night sky in the distance. The night was deep. A little dot appeared in the deep night. The white dot was very clear, as if it were carved in the illusory night, sharp and clear. The white dot was moving. With incomparably arrogant killing intent, it covered the entire manor. The white dot quickly drew closer and in a trance, it was like a meteor piercing the darkness. "Come." The white dot began to expand and turned white. Wherever the white passed, it instantly drew a 100-meter-long shadow in the night sky. "Kill." The white turned into a figure dressed as white as snow. "You." The sword light condensed around the white figure. "It's," as the voice fell. In an instant, the overwhelming sword intent surged above the whole sky, like a waterfall flowing straight down, like a raging tide rising to the sky, mighty and roaring. There was no raging fire, no thunder, no void. There was only sword intent. A silver light appeared in Jiang Qinyan's sight. In the sword intent all over the sky, everything around him seemed to disappear completely. The manor, the lawn, the fountain, the lights, everything seemed to exist, but it was so unreal. Even the white figure became illusory. Only the silver sword light that filled the night sky and tore the whole sky was so clear. Between reality and illusion, there was only one sword, moving forward with indomitable will. No words could describe this sword. This sword appeared quickly and abruptly. The silver edge ran through heaven and earth, and Jiang Qinyan could not even judge the power of this sword. Under the huge threat of life, he instinctively grabbed Schenker beside him and retreated at full speed. The silver edge became the only thing in the night. The silver light drew a straight line without any detour and rushed into the villa in an instant. Boom! The surging sword intent exploded amidst the flying dust and stones. Lights, blood, gravel, smoke and the wreckage of cars and appliances were mixed together. The sword light turned into a wave of air that swept hundreds of meters around with the smoke and dust. Wherever the wave of air passed, the surrounding lawns and fountains were completely destroyed. In the sword intent that was hot but without fire, the original green manor turned into a desert in an instant. Countless corpses were torn into blood foam and flew out. Jiang Qinyan pulled Schenker to watch this sword, and his face became completely distorted. The figure that rushed into the villa was covered with smoke and dust, blurred. But the clear footsteps accompanied by a loud heartbeat kept ringing in the smoke and dust. Who is it? Schenker stared at the smoke and dust in front of him with a pale face. He swallowed and suddenly roared. The smoke and dust slowly flew into the night sky. The blood fell slowly to the ground with the stones. Rekvia's second manor became a ruin again and a desert at the same time. In the chaos, a snow-like white dress slowly walked out of the smoke and dust ruins. The clear and flat voice sounded in the night with the surging sword intent, echoing throughout the nearby world. Chapter 410. Jianghu State Li Tianlan. On this night, the name seemed to echo over the whole Reki city. The voice was clear and bright, spreading in the air and deeply imprinted in everyone's heart. The blazing sword will dispel the coldness of the night. Blood fell, dust rose into the air and the sword chi surged in the air. Thus, the rising dust turned into a storm, sweeping up the smell of blood and blowing through the entire manor. In the chaotic flying dust, that figure slowly walked out, appearing in everyone's line of sight. White clothes, silver sword. Through the dust, the figure in Jiang Qinyan's sight was blurred, but he could clearly feel the unparalleled sharpness of the other party. His facial muscles twitched and trembled, and for a moment he looked extremely complicated. He really didn't expect Li Tianlan to be here. He also didn't expect that after Sai City, the revenge of the Snowdance Corps would come so soon. He just saw the news. How long had it been since the entire Snowdance Corps arrived in Eastern Europe? Calculating the time, the other party killed him without hesitation as soon as he got out of the airport, without even a moment's delay. The other party was obviously prepared. Jiang Qinyan's eyes gradually became ferocious. If the surprise attack of the two highnesses of Sai City tonight was a slap in his face, then Li Tianlan's sword was the second consecutive slap. Situ Tsangyue and Situ Wanjia. The two invincible realm experts hadn't made a move in front of him, but now such a young junior directly killed him with a sword. If he still couldn't respond tonight, where was the face of the Jiang family of South America? A powerful country valued power. A wealthy family also valued power. Like the Wang family of Beihai, their power had lasted hundreds of years of invincibility and glory. The Jiang family of South America, on the other hand, had hundreds of years of cold-bloodedness and deceit. Lan? Jiang Qinyan suddenly laughed. His voice was so soft that it was almost a whisper, but the resentment and coldness in it came to his face. It was particularly cold. From any standpoint, Jiang Qinyan had a reason not to let Li Tianlan go. In the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, the Jiang family of South America plotted against the Samsara Palace. Not only did they lose soldiers and generals, but even one of their hidden pawns in the killer world was killed by Li Tianlan. Jiang Qinxia. In the final Battle of Heaven Capital, it should have been his most glorious stage, and it was also the glorious moment of the Jiang family of South America's invincible family. As a result, evil died, and the Jiang family of South America's plan failed. Qin Weibai, on the other hand, was a woman that Jiang Qinyan truly appreciated and even loved. But his goddess had belonged to Li Tianlan a few years ago. As for tonight, Li Tianlan once again made him lose face. New enmity, old enmity. Jiang Qinyan's killing intent rose to its peak in an instant. The new highness of Jianghu State, a 22-year-old with the combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan was very strong and his martial arts were very special. But no matter how strong and special he was, he only had the combat capability of the invincible realm, not even the real invincible realm. This kind of strength was quite good in the entire dark world. But was this the reason why Li Tianlan kept coming to get revenge on him? Jiang Qinyan really laughed. He was angry, but at the same time he found it extremely ridiculous. Today, Jiang Qinyan seemed to want to say something. But Li Tianlan did not give him any chance at all. All the grudges were laid out there for everyone to see. The vows were still vivid and everyone could hear them. Li Tianlan gave his name. Now that he could do it, why talk nonsense? The The sword intent was hot and ethereal. The silver edge of the sword shone with a sharp light. Li Tianlan raised falling stars in his hand for a moment. The smoke-filled night sky seemed to suddenly change. From illusion to reality. In an instant, the sword energy soared into the sky. The violent sword intent, centered on Li Tianlan, suddenly burst out in a continuous stream. The sword was not condensed, but it directly covered the whole place. Jiang Qinyan's expression suddenly changed and he said angrily, "How dare you?" His roar rang out in the sword intent, but then disappeared. Jiang Qinyan put down Schenker Rekvia beside him and pounced directly on Li Tianlan. He saw the purpose of the sword. Although the sword covered Jiang Qinyan, most of the sword energy was spreading toward the surrounding elites of the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Qinyan's figure passed through the sword intent in a rage. Almost in the blink of an eye, he had appeared in front of Li Tianlan. The sword intent spread out in the blade of falling stars. Li Tianlan suddenly laughed, and his figure suddenly disappeared from Jiang Qinyan's sight. At the same time, in Reki City, outside a luxuriously decorated resort in the west of the city, two exceptionally charming middle-aged men and women were standing in front of the door, quietly watching the lights in the resort. The interior of the originally extremely relaxing resort was now filled with a tense atmosphere. Under the lights, this area was completely in a state of alert, as if it was facing a great enemy. Even the burly security guards in the resort were solemn and respectful. Look at the situation. The Jiang family is making a lot of noise in Eastern Europe. If it weren't for the low temperature, I would have thought we were in South America. The middle-aged man with a long sword on his back squinted at the lights in his line of sight and chuckled. This was a man who looked very good when he smiled. His facial features were handsome and gentle, and even his eyes seemed to be emitting a strong smile. Me? The man looked at the woman beside him and smiled. Or you? I'm in a hurry. The woman said in a flat tone. No need. Before the man's smiling voice fell, the woman beside him had suddenly disappeared. The next moment, the woman's figure appeared directly over the resort. The air over the resort suddenly twisted. The airflow roared wildly. In the almost violent momentum, the sword intent continued to hover all the way up. A vortex with a radius of hundreds of meters suddenly appeared in the dark night. Let's hurry. Only then did the man's voice fall completely. The resort security guards had noticed the abnormality of the man and the woman. A pair of security guards came over cautiously. Suddenly they saw the woman disappear and subconsciously froze. The night in the resort seemed to be getting darker. The smiling man's whole body had been completely infected by darkness. So in the security guard's sight, even the man's body disappeared. Only a kind reminder sounded in their ears. The wind is rising. The wind suddenly rose over the resort. Eastern Europe, which was already cold, seemed to cool down suddenly. The huge whirlpool in the air was still spinning, but it was no longer tangible and intangible. The entire whirlpool began to freeze in an extremely short period of time. The frost filled the air and quickly melted. Amidst the strong winds, heavy rain appeared above the resort. The fierce wind and heavy rain swept down without warning. The heavy rain was like a sword. The raindrops fell, but they did not hit the ground. Instead, they hit everything unscrupulously as the wind blew. The sword-like rain refracted shadows all over the sky in the night. For a time, the whole resort was full of sword-like rain whistling. There was chaos in the resort, and the strong fire rose in the heavy rain. Before the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed here had time to gather, the darkness had quietly enveloped the light and filled the entire manor. The sword-like rain fell more wildly in the darkness, and shrill screams rang out continuously. In the deep darkness, the fire occasionally lit up for a moment and then went out completely. Only the blue lightning of the thunder-shocking realm could maintain its own light in the darkness. But somehow, the moment a few thunder-shocking realm experts held up the light quickly disappeared in the darkness. The experts of the fire-flaming realm of the Jiang family of South America began to gather. More than a dozen experts of the fire-flaming realm gathered together. The moment the fire broke through the darkness, the dazzling light came instantly with terrifying heat. Light and darkness alternated repeatedly. In the extreme light changes, everyone in the Jiang family of South America was in chaos. Light and darkness were intertwined and perfectly integrated with the heavy rain all over the sky, turning into a storm mixed with several kinds of sword intents. The storm almost flattened the whole resort. In the shadow of death and shrill screams, a male voice with a smile sounded in the air, gentle and kind. Snowdance Corps Han Chongyang Yin Qinshi send you on your way. Han Chongyang liked to talk. On this occasion he knew that his second senior sister would not speak, so he simply said it for her. The heavy rain and the light blended completely. Phantom sword, intangible phantom of Mount Shu. Yin and Yang sword, Yin and Yang formless of Mount Shu. The sword energy blended together and spread wildly in the center of the resort. From beginning to end, no thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jiang family of South America took action. In the war in the Dark World, the number of people was indeed an advantage. But to exert this advantage, the experts in their own camp also needed to temporarily contain the enemy. No thunder-shocking realm expert of the Jiang family of South America took action. A group of elites of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm faced the sword intense of two half-step invincible realm experts without any preparation. In the messy scene it was almost a complete massacre. In the extremely chaotic scene, a horrified voice suddenly sounded. Mr. Jiang Yunxi was killed. Mr. Dark Knight is dead. Mr. Tong is dead, horrified voices rang out one after another. Jiang Yunxi, Dark Knight, Mr. Tong, they were the three thunder-shocking realm experts stationed in the resort. One was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and the other two were at the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm. Not only them, but in the resort, some experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm also died silently in the chaos. Yin-Yang sword intense and phantom sword intense were very strong. But the two kinds of sword intense blended, and it was absolutely impossible to wipe out these experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and the fire-flaming realm so easily. After losing these experts, the elites of the Jiang family of South America in the resort had no room to resist in the face of the horrible sword intent falling from the sky. Assassin. There are assassins. The sword intent was flying and spreading. The blade in the dark seemed to be assassinating the fewer and fewer experts of the Jiang family of South America one by one. The chaotic camp completely collapsed, and the elites of the Jiang family of South America began to flee in all directions. As if to match the words of Han Chongyang, the Phantom Sword Master, another clear and polite voice sounded in the night. But in the ears of the elites of the Jiang family of South America, it was like a demon's whisper. Cool breeze and drifting cloud of Sai City send you on your way. This is the first half of the chapter. I can't write any more. I have a terrible headache and feel dizzy. I can't continue to write well. If I can't write well, I'd better write less. Chapter 411. Late at night on August 7th. In the darkest night before dawn, when everyone was still thinking about what would happen when the Snowdance Corps entered Eastern Europe, Reki City, the capital of Wulan State, had completely fallen into chaos that had not been seen in decades. A large number of elites of the Jiang family of South America were stationed here. So the strongest experts of the Snowdance Corps also appeared here. No one had expected that Jianghu State would act so quickly and without warning. A few hours ago, Eastern Europe was still a stagnant water with only occasional storms. With the arrival of the Snowdance Corps, the wind had not risen and the clouds had not surged. In the calm without wind and waves in an instant, the heavy rain was majestic, abrupt, violent, sharp and ruthless. The revenge came so quickly and without warning. The list of high-level members of the Snowdance Corps was not a secret to the dark forces. So as soon as the Snowdance Corps appeared in Im, some major forces in Eastern Europe had noticed that the Snowdance Corps was missing several heavyweights. But Li Tianlan appeared in front of everyone. So no one would think much about it. So when everyone felt that something was wrong but could not tell what was wrong, the Snowdance Corps' most ruthless revenge against the Jiang family of South America began directly in Reki City. Li Tianlan was moving. Cool breeze and drifting cloud were moving. The Yin and Yang phantom was moving. In a military base in the east of Reki City, the Jiang family of South America was also moving. The Jiang family of South America had stationed nearly 800 elites in the east, west, south and north of Reki City, but three sides were attacked tonight. When he received the signal for help from the resort in the west of the city, Jiang Xiu, the person in charge of the east of the city of the Jiang family of South America, began to gather people for rescue without hesitation. Jiang Xiu was in his 40s. He had no code name and was not famous in the dark world. But as an expert cultivated internally by the Jiang family of South America, his status in the Jiang family of South America was not low at all. In terms of blood relationship, he was the cousin of Jiang Qiansong, the patriarch of the Jiang family. Such a relationship was closer than the relationship between Jiang Qiansong and Jiang Qianyan. He was a real direct descendant. This time, the Jiang family of South America sent nearly 2,000 elites into Eastern Europe, which could be regarded as the vanguard force to open up the situation in Eastern Europe. If Jiang Qinyan was the well-deserved number one figure in this force, Jiang Xiu was the second in command of this vanguard force. His strength was not strong or weak in the ranks of the half-step invincible realm, but he was absolutely difficult to deal with. His combat capability was not outstanding, but he was a master who was good at defense. This was also the reason why Jiang Xiu still dared to go over to help when he knew that the experts of Zhongzhou state who raided the west of the city were Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, and Yin and Yang Phantom. Naturally, he was no match for the four of them. Even defending himself was difficult. But at this moment, the 200 elites stationed in the military base in the east of the city with him were the most elite 200 people that the Jiang family of South America had invested in Eastern Europe. With such a lineup, even if they could not win, they could at least delay the four from Zhongzhou state. Reki City was the base camp of the Rekvia family. The cooperation between Rekvia and the Jiang family of South America had always been close, so at this time, Reki City was also the base camp of the Jiang family of South America. The chaotic city was like a net at this time. The Jiang family of South America stood on the top of the net and could see the whole situation clearly. The two highnesses of Sai City had left. Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snowdance Corps, was holding up Jiang Qinyan recklessly. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. Phantom Yin Yang. Two top assassins whose deterrent power was no less than that of the half-step invincible realm, plus two half-step invincible realm sword masters of Mount Shu in Zhongzhou state, were slaughtering other elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City. Everything was crystal clear. Jiang Xiu knew Jiang Qinyan's strength very well. In this year's holy list, Jiang Qinyan ranked 5th. With his strength, if he went all out, it would take him no more than 20 minutes to kill a young man in the invincible realm. The distance between the east and the west of the city was slightly closer than the distance between Jiang Qinyan and the west of the city, about 10 minutes. That was to say, as long as his side stalled the four experts of Zhongzhou state for half an hour, Jiang Qinyan, who had killed Li Tianlan, would rush to the west of the city. At that time, the four masters of the Snowdance Corps of Zhongzhou state would face the invincible power of the Jiang family of South America. Jiang Xiu sorted out his thoughts. When the elites of the Jiang family of South America gathered, his smile was a little twisted. The Snowdance Corps acted decisively and ruthlessly. The revenge came quickly. First it was Sai City, then the Snowdance Corps. 2 consecutive slaps in the face, crisp and loud. But it was not over. If the commander of the Snowdance Corps and the 2 deputy marshals all died here tonight, who would be slapped in the face by all this? He considered all the possible variables and suddenly said, "Come on. Go and get General Criso." Criso was the highest officer of the military base called Flying Bird. He was an old general in his 50s. He was old but firm, and he was a confidant of the Rekvia family. Although Wulan state had a land area second only to snow country in Europe, its military was relatively chaotic, especially the setting of some sensitive departments, which made people feel that it was neither fish nor fowl. The Flying Bird military base was stationed on the outskirts of the capital. Its duties were similar to those of the garrison of Zhongzhou state, but the duties on the surface were somewhat vague. Anyway, the Flying Bird military base was stationed in the Wulan state. They could be said to be the most elite army in Wulan state. Tonight, if they could join hands with the Fanio base, the strength of the military would be enough to suppress most variables. In the case that the Snowdance Corps only aimed at the Jiang family of South America, it was difficult for Wulan state to send troops. But General Criso was a confidant of the Rekvia family. In this country where the army headquarters was full of too many inside stories, as long as General Criso nodded, the army of the Flying Bird base could rush into every corner of Reki City in the fastest time. General Criso did not need to be invited at all. However, before Jiang Xiu could leave his line of sight, an old general in a military uniform with grizzled hair walked over with large strides. The Jiang family of South America was directly stationed in the military base of Wulan state, which was enough to show the close relationship between the Jiang family of South America and the Rekvia family. At this time, the Jiang family of South America was attacked, and the Rekvia family naturally had no reason to remain silent. Therefore, for the sake of the 2 million euros that the Rekvia family had just transferred to his account, the old general, who had less than 2 years left in his term, faced Jiang Xiu and went straight to the point. "Mr. Jiang, if the Jiang family needs help, the Flying Bird Corps is willing to provide military support." Military support and firepower support were sometimes 2 different concepts. At least in this case it was a different concept. At the moment when the threat was not big enough to threaten the life and death of his country, no general dared to order artillery to bombard his capital. Even if the general wanted to go crazy, the 2 million euros that Rekvia had just transferred to his account was not enough to support his fantasy. So military support was at most human support. That's great. Jiang Xiu laughed happily. He had an ordinary appearance and his eyes were a little small. When he laughed, his eyes almost became a slit, but the looming sharpness came out from his narrowed eyes. He looked at the old general's military uniform and whispered, "It's just your clothes. This is our own country and our soldiers have the right to wear military uniforms." General Criso's expression was serious and dignified. At present, a group of thugs has brought a great threat to the security of Reki City. Mr. Schenker of the Rekvia family believes that our army should appear at this time, so as to enhance the confidence of the people. This was undoubtedly a bunch of nonsense that sounded a little interesting, but in fact it was meaningless. However, Jiang Xiu listened with relish. When the old general's voice fell, he finally couldn't help laughing and even made a military salute of Wulan State. "I admire the bravery of your military. This is something that many governments lack." The elites of the Jiang family of South America had gathered. More than a dozen military trucks rumbled over. In the night, the lights of the trucks were on. The bright lampposts passed through the darkness and illuminated the darkest night before dawn. "It's my duty," General Criso said calmly and then waved his hand. The elites of the Jiang family of South America and the elites of the Flying Bird base began to act at the same time. The swift and vigorous crowd rushed into the trucks one by one. The old general made an inviting gesture. Jiang Xiu shrugged and followed him into the truck at the very front. The general drove in person. The charging march of Wulan State sounded in the base. In the passionate music, more than a dozen trucks full of combatants roared out of the Flying Bird base in the night. Money was a kind of power. Especially the euro. This power inspired General Criso's infinite pride. In the roar of the engine, he seemed to think of the countless extraordinary years in his military career. His face was solemn and serious. The truck rushed forward under his control. "Turn left." Outside the Flying Bird base was a narrow, flat path with an obvious slope. This kind of road was built outside the military base. Although it was a little inappropriate, it did have extraordinary military significance. More than a dozen trucks swooped down from a high place under the leadership of the old general, getting faster and faster. From a distance, they looked like a group of mad cows rushing down the hillside in the night. The lower the truck went, the steeper the slope became. The lights illuminated the flat road in the distance. In the truck, the general was talking to Jiang Xiu about the heroic deeds in his military career in high spirits. Wulan State had a land area second only to Snow Country in Europe, but it had been in constant turmoil in history. The financial order was chaotic, and the military and political systems were in disarray. There were some problems that were not fatal but could not be ignored. In a sense, the Rekvia family, which was based in Wulan State, was listed as one of the top 4 wealthy families in Eastern Europe, but it was not a top wealthy family in the whole of Europe, which had something to do with the overall environment of Wulan State. In such a country where even the establishment of the special warfare system was controversial, the power and blame of soldiers, especially senior soldiers, were somewhat vague. Criso was an old general, so he had a lot of achievements to show off. Jiang Xiu listened very respectfully and occasionally echoed a few words, but he had begun to outline the plan after tonight in his mind. The 2 highnesses of Sai City had left. Tonight, although their side was caught off guard by Li Tianlan, after they reacted, there was almost no possibility of failure with their strength. Did this mean that the Jiang family of South America could restart their plan to plot against the Samsara Palace 3 years ago? The current Samsara Palace had shrunk a lot compared with 3 years ago, but Li Tianlan's status was also extraordinary. If they controlled Li Tianlan, not only would Qin Weibai be in the Jiang family's pocket, but the remaining power of the Samsara Palace would also join in. Moreover, they could also take back the murderous weapon, the Legend of Qin, which they had lost 3 years ago, and even Blue Sky Underworld. They could also indirectly influence Zhongzhou State. In the dim car, Jiang Xiu's pupils gradually glowed. Criso drove and Jiang Xiu sat. One was recalling the past. The other was looking forward to the future. In a trance, a somewhat thin figure seemed to appear on the path that was about to reach the end. The truck was very tall. The figure was thin and dry, standing in the middle of the road, lonely like a blade of grass. Jiang Xiu glanced at it casually and was about to ignore it when he suddenly realized that there was indeed a person standing there. His line of sight suddenly focused. In his sight, It seemed to be an old man with sparse gray hair and a stooped body. It was a very humble posture, but as the truck swooped over, he tilted his head slightly and frowned. An indescribable sharpness and violence came over in an instant and almost filled the entire car for a moment. The truck rolled over. Jianghu saw the old man's face. It was a face that was a little weathered but very strange. Jianghu frowned and didn't have time to speak. Creak. The harsh sound of brakes rang out in an instant. The path was steep. With the braking ability of the truck, such a brake was simply a disaster. But Creso didn't seem to realize this. He stared at the old man in the middle of the road, his pupils dilated, and his ruddy face, which had been stimulated by the lofty sentiments in his heart, gradually lost its luster, became pale, and then deathly pale. The galloping truck barely stopped less than 20 meters away from the old man, and the glaring light shone on the old man's face. But the brakes in the back were too late to react, and one after another crashed into each other. The light trembled in the collision and a dull loud roar sounded. General Creso's body also began to tremble. #% and asterisk. The general opened his mouth, but only a very vague and unclear syllable came out of his mouth. His expression was extremely complicated, but it eventually turned into pure fear. At this moment the old general suddenly thought of an Eastern noun. Karma. He felt that he had really received his retribution. Just 5 minutes ago he was sitting in the truck and talking to Jianghu about his great achievements many years ago. In his boasting, he talked about the Arctic Ocean Command in Jianghu State and how he stood his ground against the opinions of the masses when the Arctic Ocean Command planned to station troops in Wulan State. He even went to war with Jianghu State and defeated the Li family, which was at the height of its power at that time. Jianghu did not refute this. He knew very well why the Arctic Ocean Command did not set up a garrison base in Wulan State. It was entirely because of the opposition of Snow Country and many European powers, and it had nothing to do with Wulan State. However, Creso was very happy as he spoke. When he was boasting about this, he never thought that he would meet the protagonist who led the army of Jianghu State to march into Wulan State a few minutes later. When the Arctic Ocean Command was established more than 20 years ago, it was the two highnesses of the Li family, who were at the height of their power in Jianghu State, who went to Eastern Europe together. That was the confrontation between the Li family and the major forces and the major European powers. There were wars and games in such confrontations. In the war of that year, in addition to the two highnesses of the Li family, there were also some equally dazzling figures. And the person who appeared in front of him at this time could barely be regarded as one of the protagonists who had established the foundation of the Arctic Ocean Command. He had set out from Im with 600 elites of the Li family in a day and a night. Along the way he had cut through the borders of 3 countries, repelled the obstruction of several superpowers, crossed a distance of hundreds of kilometers and directly attacked Wulan State. When countless experts in the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, and even the half-step invincible realm turned into a rain of blood in front of him, the 600 elites were like an unstoppable wildfire that could almost sweep the entire Wulan State. At that time, General Creso was still very young, and so was the person in front of him. After many years, General Creso almost thought that he was hallucinating when he saw him again. His face had already changed a bit. He looked older and more exhausted, and his body was no longer as straight as before. However, as his killing intent rose up, a familiar feeling washed over him, as if everything that had just happened seemed like it had happened yesterday. In front of the vehicle a person blocked the whole road. The old man frowned and looked at the motorcade in front of him. He didn't feel familiar with everything in front of him, nor did he sigh with emotion. The killing intent kept rising in him, getting stronger and stronger. All of his essence, chi, and spirit seemed to have reached the peak state in an instant. Creso's body trembled violently. Instinctively he scrambled out of the truck and ran back. The huge volume caused by the thunder-shocking realm expert resounded through the night sky. The order was simple and straightforward. Flying Bird Corps retreat. Retreat. The shrill voice spread out in the night. In the chaos the old man seemed to take a step forward. He still did not recognize the old general who was prominent in Wulan State. He did not have any feelings of revisiting the city again. He didn't like it back then. Eastern Europe was too cold. It was so cold that there was no mortal world. When he took a deep breath, it seemed to be the smell of glaciers. Now that he came here again he didn't like it either and he was a little uncomfortable. All these years he had been in the desert. The desert was too hot. Eastern Europe was too cold. Neither of them was a good place. The old man's palm was burning. The orange fire was extremely hot, dispelling the chill. The flame rose and the color gradually turned blue. Then it turned blazing white again. The color changed again, but the fire never changed. Flying Bird Corps, retreat, retreat. That's Fireman. The old general's hoarse roar reverberated incessantly. Jianghu frowned. He felt that the name Fireman was a little familiar, but he couldn't remember it. But he didn't intend to be merciful to this guy who dared to block his way. He controlled Li Tianlan. The Jiang family of South America had a very brilliant future again. Jianghu was sure to win. At this moment, no matter who stood in front of him, he would crush them. Jianghu's face twisted for a moment, and he jumped directly from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. Countless violent thunderbolts surged around him and rushed out of the car. The air was twisted and pushed forward under the thunderbolts. Boom! Under the huge force, the truck at the front suddenly flew up completely. The huge force drove more than a dozen trucks up. The truck convoy was like a mad cow, condescending and desperate to crush the old man. Fireman? No matter who he was, he had to die. The flames in Fireman's hands changed from pale white to orange again. Countless trucks soared into the sky under the influence of the lightning and smashed down violently. It was as if they had filled the night sky one after another. It was a terrifying sight. The distance between the two sides was 20 meters, and they were almost reached in an instant. 15 meters. Fireman raised his hands. 10 meters. The fire was in Fireman's single hand. 5 meters. The killing intent in Jianghu's eyes burst out completely. In his sight, the short old man lowered his body again and punched the ground. Boom! Under the deep night, the darkness within hundreds of meters disappeared in an instant. The entire Fanio base shook like never before. The existence of the night had lost its meaning. Fire. Fire was everywhere. The fire filled the ground, filled the air, and rolled into the sky. The immeasurable raging fire rose against the trend like a tsunami, and the flat path was completely lifted up by this punch. The whole road flew up. Sand, stones, trees, everything turned into a raging fire that condensed into substance. The raging fire surged like stormy waves beating the shore. One by one, the trucks that swooped down were completely swept away by the punch, exploded in the air, and turned into fireballs one after another. A large number of corpses burned for a moment in the fire. Under the blazing temperature, all the flesh and bones were burned into ashes. The ashes fluttered in the night and it was hazy. The trucks disappeared. A large number of elites and troops also disappeared completely. With Fireman as the center, the whole road had completely disappeared. A huge pit with a radius of hundreds of meters and a depth of tens of meters lay between Fireman and the Fanio base, becoming an impassable gap. The fire under the night sky began to fade. The night reappeared in the sky. The fire in the Fanio base was raging, and the burning ashes were sprinkled in the sky. The thick and white gray was like a mist. Fireman stood in front of the fire, looking at the light in front of him with a calm face. Only the fire was burning and it seemed to never go out. This was a punch that he had been silent for many years. A punch at the peak. A punch that shocked the sky. This chapter and yesterday's chapter were originally one chapter. Put them together, they are not weak. But yesterday I really had a headache and felt uncomfortable, so I published it in 2 chapters. I can't afford to get hurt if I don't save the manuscript. Chapter 412. The ethereal but very real sword intent was still surging in the ruins of the manor. In the laughter, Li Tianlan's figure had completely disappeared in front of Jiang Qianyan. Without any sign of exerting force, as if he had just turned around, his figure had lost all traces. Only the sword intent was still condensing in all directions, endlessly growing. Jiang Qianyan's figure abruptly stopped in front of Li Tianlan. His figure stopped, but the surrounding space suddenly began to twist and shatter. The void domain continued to extend. The ruins suddenly quieted down. The ruins disappeared, the smoke disappeared, and in the extreme silence, only the horrible darkness spread silently. But Jiang Qianyan still did not perceive Li Tianlan. He frowned tightly and suddenly thought of a person, or rather, a piece of equipment. 4 Spirits Armor, Azure Dragon of Jianghu State. For many years, the special warfare system of Jianghu State had gone through countless battles and finally created the 4 Spirits Armor, which was famous in the Dark World, for the 4 Spirits Generals of the Terracotta Army. The most important material of the 4 Spirits Armor was cloud silk, which was priceless in the Dark World. The value of cloud silk was not only its warmth in winter and coolness in summer, but also its extraordinary defensive power. It could absorb nearly half of the attack of an ordinary thundershocking realm expert. This meant that most of the attack power of a fire-flaming realm expert would be absorbed by Cloud Silk, and even a little of the power of an invincible realm expert would be absorbed. A little was very little. But in the battle of the invincible realm, a little of it might determine the ranking of the divine and holy lists, or even life and death. In the dark world, top inheritance, special physique and suitable martial arts were all conditions for people to defeat enemies of a higher realm under normal circumstances. Similarly, there was hardware in the dark world that could improve people's strength. The most famous was the famous 12 murderous weapons in the dark world. Any murderous weapon could almost have the deterrent power equivalent to that of an invincible realm expert. Below the murderous weapons, treasures like Cloud Silk were also hardware to improve strength. Li Tianlan had a Cloud Silk shirt given to him by Samsara Palace. This was no secret. It was also no secret what the function of Azure Dragon armor of Zhongzhou State's Four Spirits armor was. Azure Dragon General Gong Sunqi's Azure Dragon armor was improved by the Dongqing clan, and it used a technical concept that the Dongqing clan was still ahead of the world in terms of military affairs. The most advanced optical camouflage technology. Gong Sunqi was very strong. As the #1 person under the invincible realm who was recognized by many in the dark world, he could find his position even in the holy list when he put on the Azure Dragon armor. He might not win against an invincible realm expert, but he was absolutely invincible. Optical camouflage. As long as there was light, he could disappear into any corner without leaving a trace. This was the technology of the Dongqing clan. The relationship between Li Tianlan and the Dongqing clan was also no secret. The Dongqing clan repaired the damaged Cloud Silk robe in the shortest time and used their optical camouflage technology. What Li Tianlan was wearing was almost another Four Spirits armor. A touch of seriousness finally appeared in Jiang Qinyan's angry and cold eyes. Gong Sunqi was known as the first person under the invincible realm. He was the strongest among all the superiors of the half-step invincible realm. And the top superiors of the half-step invincible realm had the so-called combat capability of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan might be a little worse than Gong Sunqi, but he himself had the combat capability of the invincible realm. After putting on that damn robe, it was enough for Jiang Qinyan to pay attention to his existence. The void was still slowly spreading around Jiang Qinyan. The void domain of the invincible realm was dark and silent. But the domain of the superiors on the holy list still had light. The light was always there whether it was light or dark. Where there was light, optical camouflage could disappear in any corner without a sound. The void domain kept spreading. Jiang Qinyan's eyes suddenly turned cold. Suddenly, a gust of wind appeared in the pitch-black and silent void. The gust of wind swept every corner of the void domain, and the cold airflow stirred the silent void. The whole domain suddenly fluctuated like a curtain. Jiang Qinyan perceived everything around him with no expression on his face. His will had been completely condensed to the peak, so the gust of wind in the void was getting stronger and stronger, and it had become a storm that almost rushed out of the domain. The domain of hundreds of meters became more and more manic under his control. In the constantly undulating darkness, Jiang Qinyan finally noticed a blurry, almost unnoticeable white shadow in front of him. The light flowed subtly on the white shadow. The clothes of concealment. An illusory person. Die. Jiang Qinyan stepped down and swung his fist straight up. Boom. A horrible sound suddenly exploded in the dark domain. The domain shrank wildly, and the void of 100 meters was condensed into a fist by Jiang Qinyan. The horrible killing intent rose into the sky. Jiang Qinyan's body rushed forward, and in the fist condensed with darkness, like a goshawk seeing its prey, he swooped down with all his strength. The wildly shrinking domain became darker. Under the shroud of darkness, the disappearing white figure finally became obvious and began to become clear. Li Tianlan raised his hand. Jiang Qinyan had realized in an instant that something was wrong. The white clothes in front of him were lifelike. But he had no weapon in his hand. When he saw this clearly, his body had rushed close. The loud sound of the void condensing and exploding began to dissipate. Jiang Qinyan's fist was already full of darkness as deep as ink. In silence, white shadows appeared in front of Jiang Qinyan one after another. They were all Li Tianlan. Lifelike Li Tianlan. It seemed that dozens of white shadows appeared at the same time, and then countless white shadows gathered together wildly and finally became 3 shadows. The 3 shadows surrounded Jiang Qinyan in the center in a triangle. The shadows raised their arms. None of them had weapons in their hands. Jiang Qinyan suddenly looked back. In the domain behind him, Li Tianlan stepped out of the darkness. He raised his long sword. The three shadows around Jiang Qinyan completely copied Li Tianlan's movements and raised their arms. In the silent and dark void domain, sword energy suddenly soared. Like a storm rushing into an empty room, the violent sword energy suddenly filled every corner of the dark domain. The sword intent was so mighty, so continuous, so majestic, so condensed. There was no shadow around Li Tianlan in the void domain. But three shadows had appeared around Jiang Qinyan. Four white figures, like four lighthouses in the dark, lit up the darkness and guided the way of the sword energy all over the sky. Shadow formula. It was Tribulation's shadow formula. But now it could also be regarded as Li Tianlan's own shadow formula. The four white shadows connected the sword energy that filled the whole domain. The shadows and the real body seemed to be connected in a trance. Ferocious, swift, strange, yet exquisite. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Jiang Qinyan attacked. He looked back instantly. Li Tianlan's offensive had covered the whole domain in an instant. In the dark domain, the sword energy around the three shadows roared wildly. With Li Tianlan's real body as the end and the shadows as the front, the sword energy all over the sky directly condensed into a vast sword that ran through the whole domain. The giant sword was fierce and fierce, spinning in the darkness. The whole domain began to twist and shake with the rotation of the giant sword. The rotating sword edge, like a collapsing pillar, directly covered Jiang Qinyan. The sword intent coexisted with the darkness. Jiang Qinyan stood in his own invincible domain, but he was cut by the opponent's sword intent all over the sky and bled. There were two roads to the invincible domain. One was like Kunlun City, the Jiang family of South America, and many superpowers in the West. They all created domains with their bodies and swallowed the sword intent with their domains. The other was like the Wang family of Beihai, the Li family, the Jifeng sword reigning school, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital. They followed the path of turning oneself into a sword and breaking the domain. Simply put, the former pursued a great ability to contain and control. The latter, on the other hand, pursued absolute destructive power. Jiang Qinyan was very confident in his invincible domain. But when his domain failed to restrain Li Tianlan well, he recognized the fact. He underestimated the young man after all. The sword energy all over the sky fell like a rainstorm. The rotating giant sword had reached Jiang Qinyan's head. Feeling the almost suffocating coldness, Jiang Qinyan's eyes were cold. The white shadow was still maintaining the sword intent around him. Li Tianlan's figure flickered and returned to the darkness again. Jiang Qinyan's expression changed. Without hesitation, he suddenly raised his palm and punched the void. This was his domain. Was his void. It was made by him and could also be destroyed by him. The whole dark space suddenly paused in silence for a moment. The vast and distant darkness was completely torn apart in an instant. The domain that covered hundreds of meters of space exploded completely. Darkness and sword energy broke out at the same time. The two forces were entangled and colliding. In the ruins that restored the night, the sword intent and darkness intertwined and light emerged. Two streaks of blood appeared in the chaotic ruins. Jiang Qinyan fell from midair and stood on the ground. He bent down subconsciously and swallowed the blood gushing from his throat. In the corner of his eyes, Li Tianlan's white clothes had been completely stained with blood. His figure fell to the ground, staggered back, and then disappeared into the night again. Anger, coldness, resentment, and jealousy. All the negative emotions disappeared completely in Jiang Qinyan's eyes. His eyes were black and white. In his clear and indifferent eyes, there was only killing intent shining in his pupils. The most naked killing intent. Covered in blood, he punched again. It was still a clear and powerful fist. His movements were firm and steady. After realizing Li Tianlan's strength, Jiang Qinyan no longer held back. This was his first battle since he entered Eastern Europe. His opponent was a junior. It was disgraceful, but as long as he could kill him, everything was absolutely worth it. His body leaned forward slightly with the outstretched fist. Their tightly clasped arms splattered sparkling blood in the night. Jiang Qinyan's eyes were full of killing intent. Under the killing intent there was concentration. The punch seemed slow. But it couldn't be stopped. The punch went forward. However, the entire space was swept back along with his punch. In all directions, east, west, north, and south. All the surrounding space seemed to be completely imprisoned by the punch. Anne moved closer to him. The space was not in the dark. Instead, it became a blur of color. Only the fist seemed to be slowly enlarging in the shrinking space in a trance, as if filling the whole world. The most powerful unique technique of the Jianghu family of South America. 30-meter mortal world. The evaluation of this unique technique in the dark world might not be as good as that of the 10th unique domain. But its talent was no less than that of any unique technique. In the dark world, when all the domains of the invincible realm focused on expansion, only the 30-meter mortal world pursued shrinking. It shrank smaller and smaller. Jiang Qinsong, the patriarch of the Jianghu family of South America, performed the 30-meter mortal world. Although the domain around him was not really 30 meters, it was infinitely close. In the domain of 30 meters, Jiang Qinsong came and went with power comparable to that of a god. Jiang Qinyan couldn't do this, but he could barely shrink the domain to about 60 meters. In the domain of 60 meters, a full blow of the invincible realm was enough to destroy everything. This was the true meaning of the 30-meter mortal world. When the domain shrank, the force of a full blow would be greater. A huge force gathered in all directions. Jiang Qinyan's fist was still stretching forward. In a misty luster, Li Tianlan's figure appeared most clearly in the 30-meter mortal world. The domain kept shrinking. 150 meters. 100 meters. 80 meters. In his sight, Jiang Qinyan's fist seemed to become very big. But it was all an illusion because of the huge power of the punch. Li Tianlan's figure gradually became difficult. Under this punch, his figure was limited and he couldn't get away at all. Li Tianlan didn't want to go either. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world forcibly controlled his body and seemed to collide with Jiang Qinyan's fist. Li Tianlan looked up. His eyes shone brightly. He raised the blade of falling stars in his hand. In the overwhelming pressure, a clear whistle that could pierce through gold and crack stones sounded in the misty domain. The pressure from all sides pressed on. Li Tianlan didn't retreat half a step. He raised the sword. Charge. No words could describe Li Tianlan's decisiveness at this moment. The silver blade rose with his body. The sword intent all over the sky was released and crushed by the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. But he still held the sword. The sword intent disappeared. But his whole person had become one with the falling stars, shining with sharper and sharper light. His figure rushed into the air and rushed to Jiang Qinsong. A sword stabbed straight. This sword was not the most suitable for him, but it was not a perfect martial art. It belonged to the Li family. It belonged to the 24 moves of sword. 21st blade as shatter of land. The Li family's sword shattered the domain with sword energy. The shatter of land was the most aggressive sword move against the domain of the invincible realm. It went forward with indomitable will. The domain was still shrinking. 50 meters. The distance of 50 meters was extremely short. The white clothes and the silver sword seemed to be burning in the domain, triggering thunder. But in the end, the sword was still the sword. With a silver light, the sword blade slammed into Jiang Qinyan. Jiang Qinyan held out his hand. The domain compressed wildly in front of him. A mass of air appeared in his hand. Falling stars stabbed the mass of air directly. Boom! The whole domain shook. Jiang Qinyan's face suddenly turned pale. Blood burst out of Li Tianlan's body. The mass of air that was condensed to the extreme dissipated wildly. Falling stars in Li Tianlan's hand gradually trembled, and the straight blade gradually bent. Jiang Qinyan's eyes flashed with coldness. Li Tianlan's eyes were still as bright as stars. In the process of falling stars bending, he suddenly laughed. The Li family practiced swordsmanship, which was known to the world. But it seemed that it had been too many years, so long that everyone had forgotten, or rather, neglected some things. The Li family originated from Swordsmanship. Swordsmanship originated from the Lin clan. The Lin clan originated from the ancestors of the Lin clan. But when the amazing ancestor created the 24 moves of sword, he used a set of punching techniques. Even if many people in the Li family had never practiced that set of punching techniques, neither did the Lin clan. That set of punching techniques was very powerful. But many of the most powerful unique skills were recorded in the Invincible Manual. For hundreds of years, except for that ancestor, Li Tianlan seemed to be the only one who had practiced the Invincible Manual. Falling stars bent to the limit, disappeared in an instant, and became the silver bracelet on Li Tianlan's wrist again. Li Tianlan was in the air. The misty darkness shrouded the domain of the night. His bones vibrated wildly, and the sound was like a dragon's roar. The dragon's roar suddenly sounded, accompanied by raging fire and thunder, going straight into the sky. This was the predecessor of the 24 moves of sword. The 72 styles of Dragon Fist of the Lin clan and the Li family. Dragon Fist, flying dragon in the sky. Raging fire and thunder expanded wildly in the domain, raging everything. In this late night in the misty domain, Reki City, Eastern Europe, the Li family, which had been silent for more than 20 years, seemed to shine again. The light burned on this young man who was only 22 years old, and turned into a flame that seemed to never go out. Chapter 413. No matter what it was, anything that could exist for a long time and be passed down was definitely a classic. It was the same for martial arts. The most classic, the most basic, the simplest, and also the strongest. Hundreds of years ago, before the Li family existed, the founder of Zhuanyuantai in Jianghu state was the ancestor of the Lin clan who could compete with the Chosen One. And what laid the foundation for Zhuanyuantai was the 72 styles of Dragon Fist. Majestic, exquisite, strange, swift, fierce, feminine, all-encompassing. The ancestor of the Lin clan spent most of his life simplifying the 72 styles of Dragon Fist into 24 moves of sword. It was the 24 moves of sword that had been circulating for hundreds of years and made the Lin clan and the Li family look down on the dark world for hundreds of years. Before the 24 moves of sword reached the advanced level, the unparalleled kung fu of that ancestor was able to compete with the heavenly suns was the Dragon Fist. The Lin clan lived in seclusion. The Li family was silent. For a long time, the glory of Zhuanyuantai had been dimmed for many years. The brilliance of the invincible manual in the record of war god of Zhuanyuantai would be completely extinguished. The dark world without the Li family was lonely. But after the loneliness one would eventually forget. That night. A very ordinary time, a very ordinary place. Just when everyone was about to forget the sharpness of the battle god catalog, accompanied by lightning and flames, the strongest martial path in the battle god catalog, the most ancient ultimate art, suddenly erupted with the most resplendent light. Dragon Fist, Soaring Dragon. In the domain of the 30-meter mortal world, Li Tianlan's body suddenly stretched out. Every bone and muscle in his body was madly vibrating the dual wind and thunder veins in his body. Thunderbolts and flames spread all over the domain with his body as the center. The raging fire kept burning, and the extremely dazzling blue thunderbolts raged in every corner of the domain. It was still inconvenient for Li Tianlan to move. But under the crazy vibration of the dual thunder veins, Li Tianlan's every move carried extreme strength and speed. The sword intent of the Shatter of Land had not dissipated, and the remaining sword intent was trying to support the domain. After the domain shrank, it began to expand toward the surroundings, covering a larger and larger area, while the air mass condensed on Jiang Qinyan's fist was getting smaller and smaller. Li Tianlan strode forward. The air mass in front of Jiang Qinyan swirled wildly, desperately suppressing Li Tianlan. The silent domain began to rumble. The void, which had comprehended the power of resistance, began to condense and become heavy. All the heaviness was pressed on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan kept moving forward. The space in the domain turned into a hurricane that blew in the opposite direction. The hurricane grew stronger and stronger. Li Tianlan moved forward against the wind. His movements became slower and slower, and the pressure on his body increased. Even his movements began to change. But his footsteps didn't stop at all. He carried the mountains, the sea, and the whole world on his back. The cloud silk robe fluttered backward, and the robe behind him fluttered and a cold arc blood gushed out of Li Tianlan's body. The light on his body grew brighter and brighter. All the lightning was gathering towards him. In Jiang Qinyan's sight, Li Tianlan's figure spilled blood. Before the blood fell, his figure had completely disappeared. In front of him was a ball of light wrapped in lightning. The arcs of light were pulled out by the hurricane of the domain, forming patches after patches of light. However, he did not stop moving forward with great difficulty. The two of them were very close. Jiang Qinyan, with solemn and serious eyes, took a deep breath and shook his arms. In his hands, the majestic air mass rotated and turned into a huge vortex in the blink of an eye. Jiang Qinyan pushed the huge vortex forward one step. Li Tianlan's figure became clear without warning. The distance between the two had been reduced to less than 3 meters. At this distance, Jiang Qinyan could clearly see the wounds all over Li Tianlan's body. He could also see that the wounds on his body were constantly tearing and healing. Jiang Qinyan's pupils shrank sharply. In his sight, Li Tianlan's body was extremely clear. But he was missing an arm. His right hand was full of light. The purest, most dazzling and most violent light. It seemed that endless light gathered in his right hand, vast and majestic. In a trance, Jiang Qinyan only felt that the other party seemed to be holding a surging ocean in his hand. Li Tianlan raised his arm. In Jiang Qinyan's domain, his movements seemed slow, but he couldn't be stopped at all. The vortex in front of Jiang Qinyan pushed him toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan didn't dodge at all. His right hand smashed down. With a punch condensed with light, he smashed into the very center of the vortex. Crack. It seemed to be an extremely grand and absolutely light sound. It sounded like something was breaking. Everyone's eardrums hurt fiercely. Domain, thunder, flame, hurricane. Even Li Tianlan and Jiang Qinyan's bodies stopped abruptly. Outside the domain, both the remaining elites of the Jiang family of South America and the elites of the Rekvia family were desperately fleeing. The figures of Jiang Qinyan and Li Tianlan appeared in the night. That domain swallowed the night, almost solidifying. Everything in the domain seemed to be still. Li Tianlan's punch condensed with thunder passed through the center of the terrible vortex. The whole vortex turned blue in stillness. Li Tianlan's arm rushed in and collided with Jiang Qinyan's fist. The vortex was huge. So it looked like Li Tianlan's whole body rushed into the vortex. Crack, crack, crack. In the strange stillness centered on the domain, countless subtle sounds began to appear in all directions. The elites of the Jiang family of South America and Rekvia fled desperately. Cracks began to appear on the ground of ruins and corpses. The cracks spread in all directions, and in the blink of an eye, they turned into bottomless ravines. The bright but misty domain of silence lit up for a moment. The whole domain fluctuated like water. In the domain, Li Tianlan moved. The strange stillness suddenly turned into an absolute explosion. His whole body rushed directly into the vortex caused by Jiang Qinyan's all-out blow. The blue thunder and blood dyed the whole domain. Boom. In the loud noise that went straight into the sky, the whole vortex collapsed completely under Li Tianlan's impact. 30-meter mortal world, known as the strongest unique skill of the Jiang family of South America, began to break. The most thorough explosion. Countless misty lights flew in disorder. In the earth-shattering noise, the domain was completely broken, and the huge force rushed out of the domain completely out of control. The huge force raged in the sky and on the ground. Within hundreds of meters, the thick and hard earth was completely lifted up, and the deep surface turned into smoke and dust in the thunder and flames. As the burst domain blew into the distance, the ground of the whole manor kept crumbling and collapsing, or directly rushing into the sky. Li Tianlan was close to Jiang Qinyan. The ground was collapsing and sinking. Ruins and boulders rushed into the sky and smashed down. The sky was full of thunder and flames. In a scene like the end of the world, Li Tianlan was attacking desperately. Flying dragon was in the sky. Until the moment the domain broke, the dragon fist led by the huge force really went straight into the sky. The night was not dark. There was dazzling light everywhere. Thunder and fire kept gathering behind Li Tianlan. In the collapse of the earth, a high wall made entirely of thunder and fire seemed to form behind Li Tianlan. The high wall was hundreds of meters high, with an amazing momentum that towered into the clouds. The light of thunder and fire intertwined, spread, and rose on the wall, turning into a vision that could be seen by most of the city. The speed and power of the dual wind and thunder veins had been exerted to the limit. The dragon's roar spread far away. Thunder and fire surged behind him, and as he waved his fist, they instantly turned into countless dragon-shaped beams of light. From a distance, on the high wall made entirely of thunder and fire, dragon-shaped beams of light shot out from behind Li Tianlan and desperately pounced on Jiang Qinyan. In the light, Li Tianlan's broken white clothes loomed in the raging fire, illusory. He was unarmed, but when he waved his hands, there must be dragon-shaped beams of light around him. The majestic power turned into giant dragons intertwined with thunder and fire. The high wall was still blazing, and the dragons flew around Li Tianlan, turning into a gorgeous and majestic picture. Jiang Qinyan had no idea that Li Tianlan's counterattack would be so violent. He was not familiar with the dragon fist. But at this moment, among the countless dragon-shaped phantoms, he finally saw the once familiar Li family. The dragons of thunder and fire rushed over and were constantly smashed by Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan moved forward. Attack, attack, attack. Without any defense, he ignored any injuries. All the fighting intent poured out in the most incisive way in the brandishing of the dragon fist, turning into an instinctive desire to attack and kill. The power kept bursting under the night sky. All of Jiang Qinyan's counterattacks fell on Li Tianlan, but they couldn't make him retreat. His strength was indeed not as good as Jiang Qinyan's. But the dual wind and thunder veins, the long-lost dragon fist, the absolutely focused will, and the optical camouflage on the cloud silk robe allowed him to seize the initiative at the cost of serious injury at the moment when the domain was broken. Now all he needed to do was to attack. In everyone's sight, the earth had collapsed and disappeared, and countless boulders melted in the high wall of thunder and fire as soon as they rushed into the sky. The high wall was moving forward. Li Tianlan was moving forward. Jiang Qinyan was retreating. Countless dragon-shaped thunder and fire rushed out of the high wall in the dragon's roar, surrounded Li Tianlan, and pounced on Jiang Qinyan. The huge force distorted the air. In the crazy attack, Jiang Qinyan was completely crushed by Li Tianlan and suffered the opponent's merits in a sorry state. With the battlefield of the two as the center, the whole manor had collapsed and disappeared. Water rose from the ground and quickly gathered. The former manor had been beaten into a lake tens of meters deep. As the two passed, waves of water surged into the sky and turned into an ice wall in front of Li Tianlan. An invisible and immaterial storm surged in front of Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan didn't care about anything. He didn't even look at anything. He only attacked. The ice wall, the storm, the rising boulders, the condensed thunder, and everything. Li Tianlan chased all the way, and any obstacle in front of him was smashed and torn. The whole night was trembling in such a violent attack. This was the momentum of a warrior. It was the momentum of the peak, crazy and insufferably arrogant. No retreat until death. Dragon fist, heaven falls and earth rends. Li Tianlan's fists, like heavy hammers, hit Jiang Qinyan's arms hard. The moment the violent momentum rose into the sky, the high wall behind Li Tianlan, which was almost a kilometer high and disappeared into the end of the night, shook. The dragon's roar grew louder. It was even a little tragic. The high wall of fire suddenly collapsed with Li Tianlan's fists. Countless rays of light fell fiercely, like a long river falling from the sky or the great wall falling from the sky, almost overturning the whole world. It was earth-shattering. This was truly earth-shattering. The nearly 1,000-meter-high wall burned the night sky and slammed into the lake below, like a mountain crashing into the pond. The water of the whole lake rushed up but was instantly burned out in the raging fire. The deep pit still existed, but the water instantly disappeared in the falling thunder and fire. The lake turned into a desert in the blink of an eye. Only the dragon-shaped light was still flying around Li Tianlan, desperately chasing after Jiang Qinyan. The light in his eyes grew brighter and brighter. Fire and thunder fell completely from the sky. The dazzling light dimmed for a moment. Li Tianlan suddenly took a small step forward. In the twinkling of an eye, countless shadows appeared under the light all over the sky. Catalogue of God of War, Night Walking. Night Walking did not reach Jiang Qinyan's back, but it was close to Jiang Qinyan's body in an instant. This was the closest the two had ever been to each other. Less than a meter away. Li Tianlan's figure suddenly leaped into the air. His body tightened, his bones and muscles contracted at the same time, and his dual thunder veins were fully extended. The dragon's roar in the night sky was unprecedentedly louder, shaking the sky. Li Tianlan stood in the air, connecting heaven and earth. There was no light in his eyes, no anger, no killing intent. There was only tranquility and deathly stillness left in them. In a trance, a nearly transparent light lit up around Li Tianlan. The light suddenly straightened around him and spread to the sky and the earth. The light connected heaven and earth. Wherever it passed, all the thunder and fire were instantly absorbed by the light. Li Tianlan reached out and clenched his fist, seeming to hold the whole transparent light. Jiang Qinyan suddenly looked up. An unconcealable look of horror appeared in his eyes. Soundlessly, the ray of light descended. Jiang Qinyan seemed to be completely locked up, and there was nowhere to escape. Li Tianlan held the light in his palm and suddenly fell in midair. The light was not in the shape of a dragon. But the overwhelming dragon's roar came to him. Li Tianlan's momentum suddenly rose to the limit. This was the last move of the Dragon Fist. The fatal punch. Dragon Fist, remove armor at the sight of the dragon. In a trance, Li Tianlan's thoughts went back to Mount Qingyun more than 3 years ago. At that time, Mount Qingyun was still open to the public. At that time, Mount Qingyun was still regarded as a fairyland by outsiders. In the somewhat unfamiliar sight, he saw the white mist shrouding Qingyun Temple on Qingyun Hill, and similarly saw the old monk in the white mist. He saw the old monk's body slowly dissipating. As he muttered softly, the old monk said something that was exactly the same as his current ultimate technique. The dragon will look up, remove armor at the sight of the dragon. Boom. Late at night in Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan's body fell in midair. The misty white mist instantly rose around him, enveloping the night. Li Tianlan's body became more stretched in an instant. The dual wind and thunder veins reached the perfect state the moment the white mist appeared. His willpower also reached the perfect state. His fighting intent rose to the peak. His strength, speed, willpower, sword intent, and fist intent were completely sublimated. At this moment, Li Tianlan was unprecedentedly powerful. He was even more powerful than when he entered the invincible realm in East Island. This was the real strength of the divine list. It was a punch close to the peak of the invincible realm. Li Tianlan waved his fist. His arm smashed down directly. Puff. The change came suddenly. When he was at his most powerful. In his power. When his speed, willpower, and sword intent were fully integrated, an inexplicable pain spread through his body in an instant. Li Tianlan's momentum fell from the peak to the bottom in an instant. Nothing unexpected happened. But this punch close to the peak of the invincible realm was restricted by his perfect body in all aspects. That kind of power existed in his body, but it couldn't be condensed. Instead it flew wildly. He couldn't throw this punch. Instead, at the peak he was seriously injured because of the restriction of his body. A mouthful of blood spurted directly from Li Tianlan's mouth. It was extremely scarlet. Spoiler ahead of time? Some brothers said that Jiang Qinyan would not die. If Jiang Qinyan does not die, what's the point of writing so many chapters? Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heaven Divine Emperor Mobile Version. Chapter 4:14. No words could describe how he felt at this moment. The moment of peak, the most perfect state, the strongest attack. At the moment when his killing intent was at its strongest, he completely lost control. A sense of extreme emptiness and loneliness filled his whole body, but the powerful feeling that he could tear the world apart at will still existed. The extreme emptiness and absolute power seemed to be an illusion. Acting on Li Tianlan, all he could feel was a crazy depression. Li Tianlan's eyes turned blood red in an instant. He could clearly feel the power of this punch. See the dragon take off his armor. This was the most comprehensive condensation of a martial artist's physical qualities. His willpower was comparable to the heavenly king heart, and his dual wind and thunder veins, which were far beyond the ordinary wind and thunder veins. The martial arts he had been cultivating in his life, and the martial arts he had been exploring, were all completely integrated. This punch was almost infinitely close to the power of the peak of the invincible realm, and he would also enter the invincible realm. As long as his realm was stabilized, he would be an expert at the peak of the invincible realm who could reach the top 3 on the divine list. When he was suppressed by the Wang family of Beihai and forced to Eastern Europe by Wang Tianzong, if Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm tonight and stabilized his realm, even if he faced Wang Tianzong, he could retreat unscathed. Everything seemed incomparably clear. Li Tianlan was only one punch away from the peak of the invincible realm. What a wonderful illusion. But this punch contained all of Li Tianlan's martial arts. The distance of one punch was also the distance of the entire Great Tao. It was so close, yet it felt like the end of the world. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan truly understood that there was nothing wrong with his willpower and that he did not need to sleep all day to nourish his spirit. Traveling tens of thousands of miles for 3 years had not only exhausted him, but it had also tempered his perfect state of mind. His strength, his speed, and his willpower had all become incomparably perfect along with the formation of his martial arts. However, his progress in martial arts was a little slow. Before the invincible realm, there was no realm in his martial arts in the traditional sense. But if he didn't enter the invincible realm, he would still make slow progress. Slow progress, low level of martial arts, problems that were originally not a problem became the most serious problem. There were no flaws in his martial arts. But before the invincible realm, martial arts that had no shortcomings became the biggest shortcoming. If he could break through the invincible realm, none of the current problems would be a problem. But standing on the threshold of the invincible realm, he was perfect in any field, but all kinds of perfection couldn't be integrated at all. He couldn't keep up with the speed of gathering power. When he increased his speed, his strength began to decrease. When his strength and speed were perfect, his willpower couldn't support it. So he raised his fist. When his strength, speed, and willpower reached their peak, he could not throw a punch at all. The so-called perfection did not condense at all. Instead, it began to spread to different parts of his body, to his arms, to his legs. It spread without limit. If he couldn't condense it, how could he talk about the Great Tao? In such a situation, even Li Tianlan, with his state of mind, was stunned for a moment. The question was simple. As long as he could enter the invincible realm, when his body was tough enough to withstand all his perfections, these problems would not be a problem. But the biggest problem was that he couldn't condense his perfect strength, speed, and willpower together. How could he break through the invincible realm? There seemed to be a fault in his path. It was also like a dead knot. His body fell to the ground. The transparent light between heaven and earth, which had absorbed countless thunderbolts, was completely shattered in his hands. Jiang Qianyin, who should have had the fastest reaction speed between life and death, couldn't help but be stunned. Li Tianlan's feet stepped on the ground. The crazy blood red in his eyes disappeared in an instant, and he became calm again. At the moment when the offensive completely collapsed, he raised his hand again. Boom! From a flat land to a lake, from a lake to a desert, the whole manor ruins shook. The dissipated thunderbolts burst out in the most crazy way in an instant. Li Tianlan punched forward. His whole body seemed to be carried up by this punch, and with an unparalleled impact, he rushed to Jiang Qianyin. The distance between the two was extremely close. In just a few meters of space, Li Tianlan's figure suddenly burst out a large number of residual shadows. His whole body, like a cannonball, hit Jiang Qianyin hard. Dragon Fist, Azure Dragon Cannon. This was the first punch of the 72 styles of Dragon Fist. The beginning of martial arts. It was also the most impactful punch of Dragon Fist. There was no time to dodge or think. At such a close distance, the punch condensed with majestic power hit Jiang Qianyin's chest. The punch hit the flesh. Li Tianlan was still rushing forward. His arm, under the natural bend, drove the thunderbolts all over the sky and turned into an elbow strike that hit the same place. Li Tianlan's whole body came up and hit Jiang Qianyin hard. The power of the two sides collided completely. Wind and thunder exploded all over the sky. The flame rose into the sky and turned into a pillar of fire shooting straight into the sky. Countless storms mixed with thunder and lightning turned into a faint blue halo. The halo spread in all directions with Li Tianlan and Jiang Qianyin as the center. Along the way, the silent power of destruction followed the halo like a shadow. Everywhere the halo went, there was a land of death. Li Tianlan's figure stayed where it was. Jiang Qianyin's body was completely knocked into the air by the Azure Dragon Cannon. The sound of bones breaking was extremely faint in the sound of the thunderbolts exploding. Thick blood flowed down Jiang Qianyin's mouth, and his powerful aura began to fluctuate violently, extremely obscure and crazy. Thunderbolts and fire intertwined in the night, and the battlefield was distorted. Through the distorted space, Li Tianlan glanced at Jiang Qianyin and turned away. His figure flickered in the fire. The already somewhat broken white clothes glowed. In the blink of an eye, there was only a vague figure left in the fire. Stay! Jiang Qianyin's furious voice swept through the night sky in an instant. The invincible realm expert, who had just been suppressed by Li Tianlan, was furious for a moment. He was 5th on the holy list this year. The holy list was different from the divine list. At the top of the divine list, every rank was absolutely authoritative. The latter half of the divine list and the entire holy list would always fluctuate obscurely. Wang Tianzong had been number 1 on the divine list for several years and was invincible. No one would doubt it. But the number 1 on the holy list did not have much dominance in the invincible realm. The overall strength of the number 1 on the holy list was not as good as that of the number 15 on the divine list. Such a list might be authoritative at the beginning, but as time passed, every invincible realm expert would make progress. The gap between the top 5 on the holy list was actually very small. Jiang Qianyin was 5th on the holy list a few years ago. In the past few years, although it was difficult for him to break through the level of martial arts, his own accumulation was getting richer and more subtle in the use of power. In the next ranking of the divine and holy lists, he even had a chance to hit the divine list. But in tonight's battle, under the circumstances that he had lost the initiative, he was actually suppressed by a young man who wasn't even 30 years old. He was simply like a dog. All the injuries were suppressed by Jiang Qianyin in an instant. The entire night sky suddenly became extremely distorted. The domain spread wildly. 30-meter mortal world, 3 inches human world. The strongest domain of the Jiang family of South America would naturally have different changes. Heaven and earth began to collapse and shrink. The mortal world was only 9 meters long. Jiang Qianyin took a sudden step as if crossing the whole world with one step. This was the extreme speed of the invincible realm expert with all his strength. In the blink of an eye, in a whistling hurricane, Jiang Qianyin's figure came directly to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's figure had not disappeared. The crazy killing intent rushed to Li Tianlan from the front and the back at the same time. Lightning surged like a waterfall in the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. The lightning and the domain merged with each other. Schenker, the patriarch of the Rekvia family, had one less bodyguard. A tall European man with a cold aura left Schenker's side, turned to the battlefield and attacked with all his strength. As one of the 4 major families in Eastern Europe, the Rekvia family did not have an invincible realm expert. But in Eastern Europe before the turmoil, the Rekvia family, the Violet family, the Morton family, and the Qin family were the pillars that supported the entire Polar Ground Alliance in Eastern Europe. The previous structure of the Polar Ground Alliance was extremely complicated. The 4 supreme families in Eastern Europe, the governments of Eastern Europe and countless wealthy families in Eastern Europe united to form the Polar Ground Alliance, the world's largest and bloated super dark force. But at any time, the 4 pillars of the Polar Ground Alliance had an absolutely transcendent position. So although the Rekvia family did not have an invincible realm expert, they never lacked thundershocking realm experts or even half-step invincible realm experts to serve the Rekvia family. Huangxue, you go too. Kill him together with Henry. Schenker stared at Li Tianlan, who had been completely trapped in the domain on the battlefield, and his voice was cold and decisive. First, the 2 highnesses of Sai City attacked his manor. Then came the revenge of the Snowdance Corps. Everyone in Jianghu state seemed to be unscrupulously retaliating against the Jiang family of South America overnight. But this was the motherfucking Reki city. The war started here and it was to trample on the dignity of the Rekvia family. It was impossible for Schenker to stay out of it. Anyone who provoked Rekvia should be prepared for Rekvia's counterattack. Huangxue. Henry. Before the collapse of the Polar Ground Alliance, both of them were members of the Alliance Parliament. Although the Polar Ground Alliance still existed in name, it was in chaos and could no longer function. The 2 half-step invincible realm experts also returned to the Rekvia family at the same time and worked for Schenker. The 2 had cooperated in the Polar Ground Alliance for many years and had a tacit understanding. So when Henry helped Jiang Chenyin, Schenker did not hesitate to send Huangxue over. The figure beside Schenker moved slightly. The whole battlefield appeared again in an instant. A bolt of ice-cold lightning flashed. 2 thunderbolts spread in the night and eventually merged into the domain of the 30-meter mortal world. The whole domain was no longer the initial misty color. The entire domain was filled with a dark blue color that was filled with the aura of destruction. Li Tianlan's figure became clearer in the dim blue domain. Jiang Qinyin's expression was ferocious and cold, and eventually turned into a completely cold killing intent. In the 30-meter mortal world. In the 30-meter mortal world. Jiang Qinyin punched down with a loud bang. The whole domain twisted like never before. Thunderbolts flew and intertwined in the twisted space. The dim blue light curtain kept expanding and began to explode with a strong aura of destruction. It was not an outbreak. It was a collapse. The shattered domain shrank to a point. Li Tianlan's figure was directly swallowed by the destructive power, completely torn apart, and disappeared in an instant. Jiang Qinyin's face suddenly darkened. He saw Li Tianlan's body break into countless pieces. But there was no blood. It was just a shadow that they were trapped in the domain. Shadow again. Shadow. Shadow. Jiang Qinyin felt a headache and irritation for no reason. After the domain broke, there was silence. A biting cold wind blew through the air. Jiang Qinyin suddenly looked back. In his sight, in the position where he and Li Tianlan had just fought, Li Tianlan's figure emerged silently and went away in a flash. The Jiang family of South America is just SOSO. Second brother. It should be too late for you to save your dog now, but I don't think there will be many left. Li Tianlan's figure was getting farther and farther away. Under the night, only his wild laughter kept ringing. Jiang Qinyin suddenly reacted. He subconsciously wanted to find his cell phone, but found that it had been completely destroyed in the battle. The strongest combat force of the Snowdance Corps came to contain him. The other experts went to slaughter the elites of the Jiang family of South America in Reki City. Was that the other party's plan? Jiang Qinyin only felt that the plan was really stupid. The 800 elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City were important, but how could they be more important than Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan did contain Jiang Qinyin. But did he really think he could leave at will? Jiang Qinyin grinned and no longer cared about the 800 elites. Without hesitation he jumped up and chased Li Tianlan. At the same time, when the night was about to pass, there was a glimmer of light in the sky. In the camp of the Jianghu State garrison, the officers of the Snowdance Corps who came to Eastern Europe from Jianghu State had rested, and the camp was quiet. Lieutenant General Cheng Huaining, commander of the Arctic Ocean Command, walked in the camp and found Li Zhonghu directly. Both of them were from the Border Control Corps. Although there was a level difference, they were absolutely acquaintances. Cheng Huaining knocked on Li Zhonghu's door. The light was on in Li Zhonghu's room. Under the light, the Major General of the Snowdance Corps was already in a military uniform, full of murderous intent. It doesn't seem to be time yet. Cheng Huaining glanced at Li Zhonghu and frowned. Let's march at dawn. It's about time. Li Zhonghu said calmly, His Highness's plan leaves us a lot of free time. In order to prevent accidents and contingencies, it's just right to start now. Start? Where to? A voice rang out abruptly. Chen Qingwan, the Vice Marshal of the Snowdance Corps, rushed in and asked regardless. He had just discovered that the elites of the Snowdance Corps were mobilizing. And they were all elites from the Border Control Corps. Chen Qingwan's task was to keep an eye on Li Tianlan. Now that Li Tianlan was not there, Chen Qingwan naturally had to keep an eye on Li Tianlan's direct subordinates. A trace of disgust flashed in Cheng Huaining's and Li Zhonghu's eyes at the same time. They could understand Chen Qingwan's duty. But the other party's complete disregard for face was really disgusting. Go to Reki City. His Highness's order. Li Zhonghu said flatly. Where is the order? Chen Qingwan narrowed his eyes slightly. Password. Li Zhonghu said calmly. I can't get in touch with His Highness now. Chen Qingwan shook his head and said, so I can't be sure of this order. Generally, I don't agree with your transfer of troops this time. Report. A loud voice sounded outside the door. Reporting to the division commander, the personnel have been assembled. Dismiss on the spot. Chen Qingwan said without hesitation, this is an order. The guard who came to report was motionless. Li Zhonghu didn't even look at Chen Qingwan and said directly, get ready. We'll march into Wulan State in half an hour. Li Zhonghu. Chen Qingwan stared at Li Zhonghu. Li Zhonghu frowned, waved his hand impolitely and said, get out. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiuqian Xinhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 415. Pursuit, Fighting and Fleeing. When dawn was about to break, the whole Reki City was in complete chaos. Wulan State was very big. Reki City was outside the halo of the polar sun and the polar night, and there was still a normal alternation of day and night. However, in the time before dawn, the light between heaven and earth was dimmer. Dimness meant vagueness. Vagueness meant chaos. The dazzling light with surging power spread from the north of the city all the way to the center of the city. In the dim environment, a large area of surging and endless light shone out. The battle area was constantly shifting and expanding. The police and the army were all involved. The roaring explosion set off fire, and thunder fell from the sky. The shops, supermarkets, and neatly arranged cars on both sides of the road turned into ruins and wreckage in the majestic power and the explosion of gunpowder. More and more experts joined the chase, and a large number of troops began to block the surrounding roads, forming a human wall one after another. The battle was intermittent. Amidst the raging thunder and fire that filled the sky, there would occasionally be a flash of sword light that tore through all the attacks. Then more light would descend. The extremely turbulent sword chi and light kept changing directions. Under the leadership of the officers, the army that had sealed off the road built a thick ice wall that almost sealed off all the roads. The space for the illusory but extremely terrifying sword light to move became smaller and smaller. When there was nowhere to go, the sword light could only tear the ice wall that had reached a thickness of tens of meters. The sword light became a little slow when tearing the ice wall. Huge ice cubes flew everywhere, blood stained the ice and countless corpses fell on the street. Although the looming sword light became more and more difficult, it always existed tenaciously. Under the strong intervention of the Rekvia family, all the military forces, police forces, and expert teams in Reki City were all operating. The absolute advantage in numbers almost overwhelmed everything. Ice walls appeared in every corner of the battlefield, flashing with blue light and flying over, raging every inch of space. Li Tianlan's actions were getting more and more difficult. He had never underestimated the relationship between the Rekvia family and the Jianghu family of South America, nor had he doubted the influence of the Rekvia family in Reki City. But he did not expect that the military of Wulan State would have such an excellent response speed. From the north of the city to the center of the city, in less than 20 minutes, the lineup to kill him had become incomparably luxurious. At this moment, Li Tianlan could see that there were nearly 6 thundershocking realm experts, 2 half-step invincible realm experts, and 1 invincible realm expert chasing after him. The army of Reki City was trying to restrain him at all costs. Even if they had to sacrifice their lives, they didn't want to give Li Tianlan any chance to breathe. Time passed slowly. The losses of Wulan State were getting greater and greater. Li Tianlan was under more and more pressure. Jiang Qinyan completely let go of all distractions and bit Li Tianlan hard. It was not until this moment that he was finally sure that Li Tianlan might not be the strongest invincible realm expert in the dark world, but he was definitely the most difficult to deal with. Shadow Formula, Desperate Dao Chase, Night Travel. Several of the most outstanding body movements in the dark world were completely integrated into his body. He was swift, unpredictable, and impossible to guard against. Jiang Qinyan had a splitting headache. The speed brought by the dual wind and thunder veins to Li Tianlan was not much worse than that of a real invincible realm expert. Jiang Qinyan had trapped Li Tianlan in a situation of certain death many times. But every time he tore apart Li Tianlan with his power, it was a vivid and indistinguishable shadow. The shadow could not only die for Li Tianlan, but it could also swap places with the real body at will, which increased Li Tianlan's flexibility several times. In this state, Jiang Qinyan could beat Li Tianlan, but he couldn't King hit him. Jiang Qinyan suppressed his inner impetuosity and had no idea of giving up. Night travel was the top assassination skill, invisible and traceless. The desperate Dao chase was very fast, and it was unparalleled in both pursuit and evasion. The shadow symbol formula was extremely strange and flexible. The dragon fist was all-encompassing. The 24 moves of sword was unparalleled. Li Tianlan wandered between reality and illusion, and the flashing sword intent carried the power to tear the world apart. The dual wind and thunder veins were perfect. Looking at Li Tianlan from a hostile standpoint, everything he had at this time was enough to make people desperate. Jiang Qinyan was not without a way to restrain Li Tianlan. The problem now was that he did not have that condition. Opportunities were always fleeting. Li Tianlan was so fast that Jiang Qinyan could not make a move. What he needed was distance. Within 30 meters, no matter how many trump cards Li Tianlan had, it was useless. After all, he was not really invincible. The ever-changing 30-meter mortal world could completely imprison Li Tianlan. In the blood and fire that filled the whole battlefield, the battle was in a stalemate. Li Tianlan seemed to be unable to get away. But Jiang Qinyan could not rush to the distance he wanted either. The whole battlefield kept moving in the city center, smashing several blocks in a row. At some point, the distance between Jiang Qinyan and Li Tianlan seemed to be narrowed for a moment. But before he could make a move, Li Tianlan had already exchanged places with his own shadow. The sky of Reki City gradually lit up. The whole city was in complete chaos. The dense army that surrounded the battlefield, the broken ice wall, the raging thunder and fire, the piles of corpses and blood. Although the municipal government had issued an emergency notice, many pedestrians were still affected. The fire in the city center kept burning, and black smoke rose into the sky. The whole city looked like it had entered a period of war, a scene of doomsday. Orders were issued from Reki City one after another. All the troops around Reki City began to mobilize. At 5:30 in the morning, the Congress of Wulan State officially launched and passed the plan. They were determined to besiege the city. The president of Wulan State personally addressed the world. He said that Reki City was experiencing a disaster, but at the same time he asked the people to continue to have confidence in their government. At the same time, the foreign minister of Wulan State called Jianghu State continuously, asking Jianghu State to explain the destruction of Reki City by Li Tianlan, the commander of the Snowdance Corps. The ambassador of Wulan State to the United Nations applied for a meeting, asking Jianghu State to give an explanation and make compensation. The deep-rooted dominance of the Rekvia family in Wulan State broke out completely in the shortest time and turned into a frenzy. The application for a meeting of the United Nations was still being reviewed. But the whole world knew about the disaster of Reki City. The whole world was watching Reki City. At the same time it was also watching Jianghu State and the Snowdance Corps. Everything happened too fast. It was so fast that people couldn't react at all. By the time everyone received the news, the entire situation had completely tilted in an uncontrollable direction. In the face of Wulan State's questioning. In the face of the implicit or tough hints of other major powers. Jianghu State could only remain silent for the time being. But the Snowdance Corps was no longer silent. Just when the whole world was ready to condemn Jianghu State. In the garrison of Jianghu State, an elite army of 5,000 people of the Snowdance Corps left Im and marched to Wulan State. The whole world was in an uproar. Star State, Snow Country, France, England, Germany, and many other powers in the world called Jianghu State and asked Jianghu State to exercise restraint. Eastern Europe was in chaos. But if possible, no one wanted a real large-scale war to break out in Eastern Europe. If everything was controlled in the conflict of the Dark World, it would be in the best interest of everyone. But the problem was that now the Snowdance Corps seemed to be completely out of control. Jianghu State couldn't contact Li Tianlan at all, not even Qin Qinghuan, the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps. At 5:50 in the morning, the president of Wulan State's speech to the world had come to an end. The president of Wulan State officially defined Jianghu State as a hostile country and declared that all the members of the Snowdance Corps were terrorists. Any force or country that provided shelter to the Snowdance Corps would become the enemy of Wulan State. Wulan State would fight against the enemy at all costs to maintain the dignity of the motherland. The influence of the Rekvia family had become a giant hand that covered the sky and the sun, stirring up several countries around Wulan State. For a time, 3 countries in Eastern Europe, including Wulan State, defined Jianghu State as a hostile country and the Snowdance Corps as terrorists at the same time. No one could imagine that Jianghu State's entry into Eastern Europe would be so intense. Similarly, no one could imagine that Li Tianlan's approach would cause such a huge chain reaction. The Snowdance Corps was out of control. Li Tianlan was also completely out of anyone's control. But the situation was also out of control. The question was whether Li Tianlan could still control the situation? At present, Li Tianlan seemed to have no way back. Beihai Province, Mount Dibing. Wang Tianzong listened to Qin Qinghuan's phone call in silence for a long time. Qin Qinghuan was a direct descendant of Wang Qinglei's faction. However, although the internal dangers of the Wang family of Beihai were serious, he did not understand everything before the contradictions were made public. Wang Qinglei did not object to Qin Qinghuan getting the position of vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, nor did he give him any hints. In this way, Qin Qinghuan naturally did his duty. What excited him more was Li Tianlan's recklessness. He didn't know Li Tianlan's plan, and he wasn't even sure if the young man had a plan. He got off the plane and went straight to Reki City. Unfortunately, he was not strong enough. Now that such a big mess had happened, Qin Qinghuan almost had the urge to cheer. This was an absolutely good opportunity. Perhaps Li Tianlan could not be defined as treason, but with the development of the situation, Jianghu State was under more and more pressure. If the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City joined forces, it was entirely possible to force Jianghu State to give up Li Tianlan. At that time, it would be shown that Li Tianlan was a traitor of Jianghu State. Not only would the pressure of Jianghu State disappear, but as the vice-marshal of the Snowdance Corps, for the stability of the Snowdance Corps, Qin Qinghuan would be the best candidate to serve as the commander of the Snowdance Corps. So on the phone, facing Wang Tianzong, whom he usually respected and estranged, Qin Qinghuan's tone had been a little excited. "Your Majesty, this is an opportunity. Why don't we join forces with Kunlun City to push it?" "No hurry." After a long silence, Wang Tianzong slowly said, "It's not over yet. Don't rush to conclusions. Wait and see." Qin Qinghuan was stunned. Wang Tianzong silently hung up the phone. However, before the phone was hung up, Wang Tianzong's words shocked Qin Qinghuan. "I will arrive in Eastern Europe before tonight." At 6 o'clock in the morning, all the troops of Reki City had been completely assembled. The troops of all the nearby cities were mobilized. Reki City was completely blocked and besieged. Li Tianlan tried his best to move the battlefield, and his actions became more and more difficult. The pursuit continued. Jiang Qianyin was less than 40 meters away from Li Tianlan. The battlefield moved from the north of the city to the city center, nearly 30 kilometers away. The fight that made everyone tremble with fear was about to end. Ahead, in the Holy Thunder Memorial Square of Reki City. For the entire Wulan State, this was a sacred place for heroes. Jiang Qianyin suddenly felt that this square was really good. Although the square was destined to be ruined in this battle, Li Tianlan deserved the honor of this place. Close. More than a dozen monuments tens of meters high on the square looked extremely majestic and solemn in the dawn sky. The morning sun cut through the sky. The morning sun shone from the east. Jiang Qianyin subconsciously narrowed his eyes. His vision blurred for a moment. The next second, Li Tianlan's bloody figure suddenly disappeared in the sunlight. Jiang Qianyin was not in a hurry and just sneered. Now the so-called stealth body movement and optical camouflage were meaningless. Because Eastern Europe was too cold. The square surrounded by tens of thousands of troops was even colder. An ice wall covering the entire square was constantly spreading and taking shape. The ice wall condensed by tens of thousands of people was almost a glacier. It was not easy for Gu Qianchuan or even the experts at the bottom of the divine list to break through such a scale. No matter how sharp Li Tianlan's sword energy was, what could he do? The troops began to gather toward the center of the square from all directions. The condensed glacier blocked the sunlight and slowly squeezed over. Jiang Qinyan's figure stepped into the memorial forest of monuments in the square. There were wisps of light coming out of him and sweeping forward. The light completely enveloped Jiang Qinyan. The blood on his body disappeared from everyone's sight. The light completely covered him. Jiang Qinyan moved slowly, like a leisurely walking sun. The light kept surging. 30-meter mortal world, glorious holy hall. In an instant, all the light centered on Jiang Qinyan. It spread out and covered the entire square. In the strongest field of the Jiang family of South America, all optical camouflage was meaningless. Jiang Qinyan saw Li Tianlan. All the experts who followed him also saw Li Tianlan. He stood on the tallest monument in the monument forest, holding a long sword. The sword intent on the blade of falling stars whistled. The moment his figure appeared in the domain, the silver light suddenly rose into the sky. The long sword stabbed straight. The silver light burst out. The sword intent was completely restrained, and it looked very ordinary. But as the sword intent of nothingness passed, everything became extremely real in an instant. The silver sword edge was still moving forward. Li Tianlan took a step forward. The light around him changed from real to nothingness, and from nothingness to falsehood. But the illusory sword intent appeared in everyone's mind with incomparable realism. The sword seemed to pierce the space. The sword light lit up. The sword energy had been overwhelming and surging down. See breaking move. The sword energy enveloped all the experts, including Jiang Qinyan. Blood sputtered. Jiang Qinyan was calm. When the sword energy was about to sweep his body, he was calm and even had the mood to smile. 30-meter mortal world, so close, yet worlds apart. The 30-meter mortal world was fast. But this foot-apart art was even faster. The whole space was obviously distorted. Jiang Qinyan's figure retreated like a cannonball. In the blink of an eye, his figure almost disappeared from Li Tianlan's sight. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows sharply, and the blade of falling stars moved forward again. You seem to want to chase. Why can't you see me? A peaceful voice with a vicious smile suddenly sounded behind Li Tianlan. Bang! Jiang Qinyan, who seemed to have retreated far away, appeared directly behind Li Tianlan and punched him hard in the back of the heart. Thick blood spurted out of his mouth. However, this powerful and heavy punch did not send him flying. All the power rushed into his body, broke out, and became a serious injury. It became an internal injury. Jiang Qinyan laughed. Li Tianlan had the shadow formula. He had the desperate chase. He had the dark night walking. They were all the top body techniques in the dark world. But not all the top body techniques in the dark world belonged to the Li family. 30-meter mortal world was the strongest unique skill of the Jiang family of South America. In other words, the Jiang family of South America only had this unique skill. But the endless changes in it were equally broad and profound. The 3-inch world belonged to the body technique. A short distance between worlds also belonged to the body technique. Li Tianlan's body bent down subconsciously. The vast and spreading domain gathered quickly with crazy killing intent. 30-meter mortal world, Sanluo Hal. The domain closed. The sound of wind could be heard from every corner of the domain. Masses of air condensed in the domain one after another, eventually turning into swords and sabers. The swords and sabers were all aimed at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, in a seriously injured state, took the Sanluo Hell head-on. It was not easy to find a whole body, not to mention whether he could survive or not. Jiang Qinyan punched down again. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared in an instant. A shadow broke in front of Jiang Qinyan. Li Tianlan's figure moved sideways in 2 steps, changed his position and faced Jiang Qinyan. The distance between the two was no more than 5 meters, and they stood on the same monument. Go in peace. Jiang Qinyan sneered and clenched his fist. The swords and sabers that filled every corner of the domain shook at the same time, like a large torrent, rushing toward Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan held falling stars with both hands. He raised the sword to his eyebrows. This move was not a unique skill. Only sword intent. The purest sword intent surged violently on the blade of falling stars, rushing toward the dense swords and sabers that occupied his field of vision. The swords and sabers perished in the sword intent. However, more and more swords and sabers were rushing over endlessly. The domain of the 30-meter mortal world grew thicker and thicker. It was unbreakable. Li Tianlan's sword intent kept flying in the domain, but it was always a step behind. No skill could make up for this step. This was the gap between the invincible realm on the holy list and the invincible realm. Naked, obvious, close but out of reach. Only a step behind, but the outcome was clear. Li Tianlan's sword intent grew weaker and weaker. In the domain, the mighty swords and sabers turned into a growing torrent, pressing toward Li Tianlan's body. Jiang Qianyin, who was also trying his best to maintain the domain, narrowed his eyes and was about to continue. Boom! The whole monument, which was tens of meters high and nearly 10 meters wide, shook with a bang. A heat wave as violent as magma rose from under his feet, and the flames were monstrous. The army in the distance was still slowly gathering toward the square. But in a few unknown corners of the square, there was sword light and wind and clouds surging. It was like a plan agreed in advance. It was also like a temporary rescue. The sword light surged and burst out. The killing intent that had been lying in ambush here for a long time burst out at Jiang Qianyin's most relaxed moment. Jiang Qianyin lowered his head. At this moment he finally understood why Li Tianlan rushed in this direction at the risk of aggravating his injury not long ago. He looked over the tall monument and saw a skinny old man who was already a little bald. The old man appeared silently under the monument and held a corner of the monument in his palm. The raging flames surged up like a surging wave. The whole stone monument instantly turned red and even a little transparent. The old man's arm shook violently. In the boundless heat wave, the whole monument kept shaking. The skinny old man seemed to have pulled the whole monument, which was tens of meters high, out of the ground with one hand, uprooting mountains and rivers. About Qin Xinghuan, it seems to have been said that he was a woman. I was going to write that he was a woman at first, but then I thought how bad it was to be a woman. So I did an operation on him. He became a man. It's officially confirmed that Qin Xinghuan's operation was successful. He is a man. Genius. 1 second to remember this website. Mobile version. Chapter 416. The change in the square was so sudden. Just when everyone thought that the outcome had been decided and Li Tianlan was bound to die, the whole situation plummeted and there were infinite variables in an instant. The vast and thick layer of ice still covered the entire square. But on the icy plaza, under the monument, flames suddenly soared into the sky. The monument, which was tens of meters tall, was almost uprooted. Flames burned from the bottom of the solemn and tall stone pillars. The blazing heat dispelled the chill, and a raging fire that was similar to a domain appeared in everyone's sight. The flames roared and jumped and the heat waves rolled. The layer of ice formed by the tens of thousands of soldiers suddenly stopped, and then continued to press forward. However, its speed gradually slowed down as if it had met with some kind of resistance. The Sinluo hell transformed from the 30-meter mortal world still suppressed Li Tianlan's sword intent. Jiang Qianyin lowered his head and stared at the old man under the monument with bloodshot eyes. As the second master of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Qianyin could be unfamiliar with anyone, but he would never be unfamiliar with Jianghu State. The Jiang family of South America was the only superpower that Jianghu State clearly listed as a hostile force. Even the Heroes Club that had invaded Jianghu State had never received such an honor. The Jiang family of South America was rooted in South America, like a big tree with branches and leaves, and had long reached the sky. The feud between Jianghu State and the Jiang family of South America was almost a war from beginning to end. The Jiang family of South America had always stubbornly believed that Jianghu State should have been theirs. After the establishment of Jianghu State, the Jiang family lay dormant in Taiwan Island. After the return of Taiwan Island hundreds of years ago, the Jiang family took root in South America. For a long time, this obsession, which they regarded as hatred, had been supporting their development. They were enemies of Jianghu State and had caused unimaginable damage to Jianghu State. Jianghu State had also caused heavy losses to the Jiang family of South America. In the past hundreds of years, the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family of Jianghu State were at the height of their power, and the Jiang family of South America was not allowed to enter Jianghu State. After the collapse of the Li family and the rise of the Gu family, the Jiang family of South America tentatively set up several strongholds in Jianghu State. However, Those strongholds were completely destroyed by Qin Weibai before and after the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago. But the Jiang family of South America never gave up their plan to enter Jianghu State. So in the eyes of the Jiang family of South America, Jianghu State was the biggest enemy. The Jiang family of South America had a deep understanding of the enemy. The Li family, which guarded the stability of a country with the power of a clan, was once one of the most terrifying enemies faced by the Jiang family of South America. Even though the Li family had disappeared for more than 20 years, Jiang Chenyin would never forget some special people in the Li family. Amidst the flames, the old man with the power to uproot mountains and rivers shook the monument. His figure was already in the shadow of the monument. Jiang Chenyin and Li Tianlan shook for a moment at the same time. Jiang Chenyin suddenly raised his head. The moment the domain of the 30-meter mortal world became more condensed, under the monument, the old man's calm and somewhat dull voice slowly rang out. "Waiter, don't you call me uncle when you meet an old friend?" Jiang Chenyin's body staggered. The domain around him relaxed in the blink of an eye. Li Tianlan's sword intent, which was gradually suppressed by the domain, suddenly spread out, trying his best to take the initiative. Jiang Chenyin didn't care. His face instantly flushed red, and even became a distinct purplish-black color. "Fireman." He gritted his teeth and his hair stood on end. After some time he let out a ferocious roar. He seemed to have lost his mind as he lifted his leg and stomped on the ground. The tall and majestic monument burst into flames. The great force penetrated the top of the monument, and the whole monument was completely crushed by Jiang Chenyin's foot. Stones flew all over the sky. The 30-meter mortal world temporarily remained high in the sky, suppressing Li Tianlan. Jiang Chenyin, however, seemed to have lost his mind and desperately rushed to Fireman, who suddenly appeared. Fireman had a high seniority in the Dark World. Among Li Honghe's sacred guards, Fireman was the youngest one. So when he later went to the Border Control Corps to serve as the vice-marshal to assist Li Guangtu, everyone felt that he had become Li Guangtu's guard again. But the highness he followed was only Li Honghe. In terms of seniority, Li Guangtu had to call him uncle. Jiang Chenyin called Fireman uncle and the seniority was not wrong. But the other party was Fireman. For Jiang Chenyin, this uncle really contained countless unbearable memories and humiliations. Jiang Chenyin's body fell into the air. His eyes were scarlet and gloomy, full of deep resentment. He would never forget something in his life. More than 2 decades ago, he and his elder brother Jiang Qiansong, who was not close by blood but was like a brother, broke through to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. At that time, the two brothers were full of ambition and were personally responsible for an operation against Jianghu State on the Tianan border of the Jiang family of South America. The two took more than 400 elites of the Jiang family of South America and sneaked into a small village on the border of Jianghu State from the Tianan border. But then in less than 8 hours the sacred guards of the Li family pounced directly. 2 people. Only 2 people. That night, the cruel poison spread through the village in the wind, and thunder burst out all over the sky. Hundreds of elites of the Jiang family of South America died under that man's hand. He and Jiang Qiansong, too at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, joined forces, but they were no match for a fire-flaming realm expert. 3 punches. The other party only punched 3 times. The battle was strange, short, and fierce. The poison spread and swirled in the wind. The raging fire was raging in the night sky. Within 3 punches he and Jiang Qiansong were completely crushed and eventually defeated. That was the Li family at its peak. Just 2 sacred guards, Poison Doctor and Fireman. But they completely destroyed the plan of the Jiang family of South America in the shortest time. What Jiang Chenyin remembered most was not the strength of the Li family, but the insult, even humiliation, that the man codenamed Fireman brought to the 2 brothers after their failure. They just slaughtered a small village of untouchables in Jianghu State. What did they do wrong? But that son of a bitch was Fireman. yen %%, and #yen %% and no grace, no dignity. At this moment, Jiang Chenyin seemed to be completely crazy. His face twisted, he opened his mouth, and a stream of cold and hot air poured into his mouth. His voice was distorted and vague, but countless vicious voices, like shrews cursing in the street, suddenly rang through heaven and earth. In just a few seconds, Fireman's closest family members had been cursed. But Fireman had no relatives. He looked up and saw Jiang Chenyin coming down from the sky, getting closer and closer. Then he punched. Suddenly, the silent and somewhat dull fireman's momentum changed and became extremely sharp and fierce. The majestic power shattered the surrounding stones in an instant. Fireman's bones kept shaking. The punch hit the air, but it seemed to penetrate the space. The whole space suddenly twisted and broke completely. The broken space was not filled with silence and darkness. The heat wave that filled the world suddenly surged out of the broken space in an instant. Fire. The incomparably condensed fire occupied everyone's sight. The raging fire surged and spread wildly in all directions with Fireman's fist as the center. It seemed to be floating, but it also seemed to be flowing. The fire that filled the world was burning like solid magma. In an instant, the magma completely replaced the world and the ice that was pressing toward the square. There were burning flames and flowing magma in the sky and on the ground. Wherever the fire passed, the domain, the sword energy, and the void all fluctuated completely in an instant. The world was boiling. The punch was so familiar, but it was completely different. Jiang Qinyan's eyes became dazed in rage, and then awe-inspiring. The punch. Li Tianlan had just used it. Dragon Fist, Azure Dragon Cannon. The punch was like the Dragon Fist, but not quite. It was more like Fireman's own fist, his own martial arts. Jiang Qinyan sobered up in anger for a moment. But the punch that shattered the space had already swept over with the raging fire all over the sky. Those who could be the Li family's sacred guards were all strong men. And with the personal guidance of the Li family's highness, the strong were naturally stronger. The Li family's sacred guards had their own characteristics. In those days, Li Honghe either taught them the unique skills of the Li family or standardized their martial arts path according to their own characteristics, spending countless efforts. Only Fireman was the most worry-free. He had his own path and was not interested in the Li family's 24 moves of sword. He was too lazy to use a sword, so from beginning to end he just asked Li Honghe for the first 3 punches of the Dragon Fist. The most basic 3 punches. He integrated his martial arts into these 3 punches. So Fireman only knew these 3 punches. In any battle he used 3 punches over and over again. The simple ones were often the most flawless. Jiang Qinyan finally realized the horror of Fireman. The man who could suppress him and Jiang Qinsong on his own should have entered the invincible realm, entered the divine list, and entered the top of the divine list. More than 20 years in prison had completely ruined his path to the invincible realm. But even if he was not invincible, in the fire-flaming realm he was not easy to bully. The fire, like a raging wolf, completely swept Jiang Qinyan. Boom! A terrible explosion suddenly sounded in the sky. The sword intent that tore the space completely lost its restraint. Li Tianlan's figure disappeared in an instant. But the next second, the extremely terrible sword intent had changed from illusory to incomparably real. The sword light was like a dragon. Without any hesitation, it pierced directly into his back. Jiang Qinyan's heart sank completely. He was really excited to see Fireman again, but what he thought more was that Fireman had been in the desert for so many years. At his age, his strength must have regressed at this time. As long as he killed him, he could concentrate on dealing with Li Tianlan. But he underestimated Fireman's strength and also let Li Tianlan out of trouble. Neither of them had a clear realm. Fireman was in the fire-flaming realm, but he had already transcended it. Li Tianlan had no realm. But the strength of the two was almost the same. When he couldn't attack, he could only let go. A vast domain expanded directly around Jiang Qinyan. There was no wind in the air. But the whole space turned into an irresistible airflow. The space kept pushing outward. 30-meter mortal world, boundless sea and sky. The whole space turned into a hurricane seemed to completely push Fireman and Li Tianlan away. The 2 half-step invincible realm experts of the Rekvia family, Huangxue and Hanri, arrived at the scene. Behind them, more experts of Reki City also rushed over. Jiang Qinyan's heart had not completely relaxed. On the square, which was getting smaller and smaller under the pressure of the ice, the sword intent and the wind and clouds surged at the same time. The ice blocked the sun. In the dim space, the majestic sea of sword shadows appeared in every corner of the square without warning. No brewing, no preparation. The moment the sea of sword shadows formed, they suddenly broke out. The sword shadows were like a curtain. The sharp but fleeting sword shadows were completely aimlessly sweeping and raging. Tens of thousands of sword shadows rushed to Huangxue and Hanri. They rushed to the experts who were chasing after them. They rushed to the army surrounding the square. They were overwhelming. The power of one sword was almost earth-shattering. This was the momentum of the peak of the invincible realm. Huang Shui and Henry changed their faces at the same time. Without thinking about it, they turned around and ran. Jiang Qinyan saw all this clearly. He suddenly opened his mouth. "Come back, it's all fake." Before he could finish speaking, an even louder and clearer voice suddenly swept across the battlefield. Borrowing the sword to yin and yang. Ice and fire intertwined on the battlefield. Ice was yin. Raging fire was yang. Borrowing the sword. There was a clear and crisp sound of a long sword being unsheathed on the battlefield. Fireman let go of his control. The boundless raging fire and ice kept surging and madly condensed above Jiang Qinyan's head. The yin and yang sword intent circulated. In the blink of an eye, two different kinds of light appeared above Jiang Qinyan's head. It was like the sun and the moon shining together. The light was cold and hot. At the same time, the sword curtain, which was comparable to the full blow of the peak of the invincible realm, swept Henry and Huang Shui. It swept the tens of thousands of troops in the square. The mighty sword curtain, like a sudden heavy snow, rushed past everyone. Huang Shui and Henry, who were in despair, were stunned for a moment. The two superiors of the half-step invincible realm looked at their bodies with some doubts. In the square, the mighty sword curtain had disappeared. And the actual power of the sword, which was comparable to the peak of the invincible realm, was far less than that of the ice-condensing realm. The sword curtain swept all the way but did not leave even a wound on the two. All the terrifying aura was just an illusion. Or rather, a phantom. Phantom sword intent. Fuck. Henry scolded loudly and he couldn't tell whether he was glad or angry. The two looked at each other and were about to step forward. Just when their emotions fluctuated the most. It was the perfect time. Two shadows had already silently appeared behind the two of them. There was no sound, no murderous intent, no thunder. Thunder, raging fire, and cold wind. In a gentle silence, two sharp blades quietly pierced the back of the heads of the two superiors of the half-step invincible realm. The pain went away in an instant. Boundless darkness came. The moment they sank into the eternal darkness, the two superiors of the half-step invincible realm didn't even know what happened. The wind and clouds converged behind the two bodies for a moment, and then silently disappeared into the void. Cool breeze and drifting cloud. Jiang Qinyan, who saw this scene with his own eyes, suddenly blacked out and almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The false phantom sword curtain passed. The real phantom sword appeared directly near Jiang Qinyan the moment the yin-yang sword intent was formed. Li Tianlan, who was pushed out, stood in the distance where he was. In his sight, there was the sword curtain not long ago and the sun and moon formed by the yin-yang sword intent. The scene was familiar. Just like on Lonely Mountain, Wang Tianzong's magnificent sword curtain and Lin Fingting's sun and moon in the palm. The scenes seemed to be similar, but the artistic conception was far from it. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, felt the touch in his heart, and clenched the falling stars in his hand. Fireman, who was also pushed out, began to charge. The terrible flame burned him recklessly, and the space was evaporated. Almost in an instant, a pseudo-domain that was only half a line away from the real domain appeared around Fireman. It was only a little bit away from the real domain. Water like magma surged and boiled in the pseudo-domain. The yin-yang sword intent rotated wildly. The sun and moon shone together and yin and yang merged. The phantom sword intent was no longer a phantom, but combined with the yin-yang sword intent, condensed in one point, and stabbed into the domain around Jiang Qinyan. There was a small breach in the domain. Then it was completely merged with the pseudo-domain around Fireman. Two shocking killing intents came out from different directions. Cool breeze and drifting cloud rushed to Jiang Qinyan from different directions. The threat of death really shrouded him. Jiang Qinyan's expression changed dramatically. Two experts with the combat capability of the invincible realm. Two sword masters of the half-step invincible realm. Two assassins at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. The situation suddenly changed. This was a real desperate situation of life and death. 30-meter mortal world, the beginning of all things. Without any reservation, Jiang Qinyan improved his domain regardless of everything, even regardless of the drop in his realm. The beginning of all things was quiet. 30-meter mortal world spread over, resisted the raging fire, blocked the sun and moon, shattered the phantom, and obliterated the killing intent gathered by the wind and clouds. Amidst the silence, a flash of sword light appeared in a place that was both very far and very near. Li Tianlan raised the broken star. The silver sword light was soundless, faint, and cold. Everything in the whole world seemed to disappear in an instant. There was no heaven and earth, no things, no mortal world, no raging fire and domain. The world was a sword. What was illusory was an illusion. What was real was the sword intent. Only the sword intent. The sword light tore through the illusion and floated forward in the most real world. There was no speed. Fast and slow completely lost its meaning in the silence. Jiang Qinyan's eyes became extremely frightened. Under the restraint of countless external forces, he could not stop this sword. He really didn't want to die. He had never thought that he would die here. He was the second master of the Jiang family of South America. He was an invincible realm expert. He would rush into the divine list and make the Jiang family of South America more glorious. He would kill Li Tianlan, occupy Qin Weibai, and even take over Zhongzhou state. There were too many things he had not done. How could he die? How could he die? The sword light floated to his chest in the silence. The long sword flashed. Li Tianlan held the sword and stabbed forward. But his figure had completely disappeared. At this moment, the only thing Jiang Qinyan could see was the sword intent that made him doubt the world. Or rather, only the tip of the sword. This was Li Tianlan's kendo. Reality and illusion. Like the heaven-cutting move, the sea-breaking move, and the forever silent world. This move was called shattering. The shattering move tore up the domain around Jiang Qinyan. There was no stagnation or slowness. The sword edge floated forward. Puff. The sharp sword edge instantly pierced Jiang Qinyan's heart. The sword chi completely exploded in his body, mincing his heart, mincing his internal organs and cutting off all his life force. Jiang Qinyan's frightened eyes dimmed instantly. Because it was dim. So the second master of the Jiang family of South America seemed extremely calm at this time. All the sword intent and domain around him disappeared completely. Jiang Qinyan desperately tried to keep his last trace of vitality. He stood in the air, swaying. Li Tianlan frowned. He was keenly aware that something was wrong and said without hesitation, "Retreat. Retreat." Jiang Qinyan's faint voice sounded, but it was like thunder. The corners of his mouth curled up and he smiled. His smile was filled with unwillingness and resentment. "I will fall, but all of you will die with me." His voice became smaller and smaller, but in the last glow of his life, his aura suddenly began to swell and climb. Together, Jiang Qinyan's body lit up. In the light there was his own domain. There was fire, thunder, ice and hurricane. There were also phantoms, yin and yang and fireman's pseudo-domain. Everything swelled up in the tiny domain around him. Die, his voice fell. All of Jiang Qinyan's unique skills as well as the power that had just attacked Jiang Qinyan, burst out completely. This was a full blow from an invincible realm expert on the holy list, knowing that he would die. It was also the final move of the 30-meter mortal world. 30-meter mortal world, live as long as heaven and earth. I live as long as heaven and earth. If I am silent, heaven and earth will be silent. It broke out. The terrifying power burst out in an instant without the slightest preparation. There was no time to react. The surging light, with the final blow of the invincible realm, spread to several high-level members of the Snowdance Corps almost instantly. Yun Qinshi, the Phantom Sword Master, and Han Chongyang, the Yin and Yang Sword Master, stood in front. A fierce and majestic force came from behind, pulling the two unprepared people back. The space was slightly blurred. Li Tianlan took a step out. His figure was so natural, so casual. However, amidst the destructive light of heaven and earth, he took a step forward and appeared in front of everyone, blocking everything. Without hesitation. Genius 1 second to remember our website. Mobile version. Chapter 417. This scene was so familiar. It was so familiar that everyone was in a trance. 30-meter secular world, longevity with heaven and earth. This was the final move, but it could no longer be considered a lost art. This was an invincible realm expert releasing all his potential, vitality, all the martial arts he had practiced in this life, and even the power of the enemy's attack on him in the most thorough way. The blow of an invincible realm expert perishing together with the enemy. No one could block this attack. In the desperate situation of life and death, Li Tianlan stood calmly and casually in front of everyone. Calmness was a kind of power. Li Tianlan was so calm as if he was born to stand there. Whether it was glory, humiliation, or a hopeless situation of certain death, he should stand there. The eyes of Phantom Sword Master Yun Qinshi of Mount Shu sect seemed to have lost all their luster in an instant. She became dull and lost in thought. The strong and real sword intent seemed to have locked down the entire space. The entire space was constantly being pulled back by the sword intent. In a hurry, Han Chongyang inadvertently glanced at Yun Qingxi's expression and sighed softly in his heart. He was the Yin-Yang sword master of Mount Shu. Among the 4 great sword masters, only he was about the same age as Yun Qingxi, so he naturally knew some of Yun Qingxi's past. Back then, when Yun Qingxi's realm was still low and she was traveling in Jianghu state, she was once intercepted by the first elder of Azura Path. In a deadly situation, it was a young man she met on the road who solved all of this for her. Finally, it formed an entanglement that might not even be regarded as an ill-fated relationship. Presumably, that year in the northeast of Jianghu state, in the same world of ice and snow, there was also a man standing in front of him like today. That man was called Li Kuangtu. On this day it was Li Tianlan who stood in front of her. It was like a joke full of dry humor. Fate, history, the past, all of them were in the cycle of reincarnation. In a sense, perhaps life was just repeating itself. Han Chongyang seemed to have thought of something as well, but he was the first to come to his senses. The confined space kept pulling him back. Han Chongyang raised the yin-yang sword that was already unsheathed. "Senior sister." He suddenly let out a low growl. Yun Qingxi looked at Li Tianlan. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud were looking at Li Tianlan. Fireman was also looking at Li Tianlan. All he could see was the back view. The silhouette was not tall or burly. But in the face of the ice, wind, fire, lightning, and the flickering light of the sun and moon in the chaotic scene, his figure revealed an indescribable firmness and calmness. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud thought of Situ Tsangyue, the governor of Sai City, who would stand in front of everyone in a critical situation, and of Tribulation, who would inevitably stand with Situ Tsangyue. Fireman thought of Li Honghe, who always stood at the forefront of the Li family in Jianghu state. Everyone had a leader in their hearts. As long as he stood there, no matter what situation he faced, whether it was death or disaster, as long as he was there would be a reassuring force. At this moment, in a critical situation, Li Tianlan appeared in that position and seemed to have the same power. Fireman chuckled. For the first time in decades, he smiled so peacefully, as if he had never experienced decades of imprisonment and countless people's criticism and ridicule. Everything else seemed unimportant. Most importantly, he finally saw the Li family that could stand in front of everyone for the first time. The Li family was very young. But he was fearless. Fireman suddenly let out a long roar. Under the rising sun on the horizon, there seemed to be countless rays of light gathering toward him in an instant. Vaguely, the old man, who was already a little stooped, seemed to straighten his back and restore the calm, silent, and energetic years of his peak. But he was old after all. No matter how unwilling he was and how unconvinced he was also old. Fireman was laughing, but he wanted to cry inside. All those who knew Fireman knew that he not only had the hope to enter the invincible realm, but he had almost absolute certainty that he could enter the invincible realm. 40 years old was a threshold in the invincible realm. But it was not absolute. On the long road of martial arts, there would always be accidents. More than 20 years ago, Fireman was just in his early 40s. His state was very good and even rising. If it hadn't been for the treason case more than 20 years ago, the Li family was still at its peak. Even today, the Li family had 3 experts on the divine list in one family. But how could everything in the world be satisfactory? During his time in the desert prison, every year, Fireman knew that his hope was getting smaller and smaller. Until his state began to decline. He realized that he was really old. And this feeling had become so obvious today. At that time he could crush Jiang Chensong and Jiang Chenyan on his own. Now the person he crushed was a divine list. One was on the holy list. What about himself? Half-step invincible realm. Some of his unwillingness had gradually faded. When he came out of the prison this time, he was Li Tianlan's bodyguard, a close guard. He was glad that he chose the path in prison. At least he still had a chance to play his part. Fireman's clenched fist trembled slightly. His fingers slowly opened. What even Li Tianlan didn't know was that as soon as Li Tianlan left the desert, Fireman changed his path. He abruptly cut off his road to the invincible realm, which was close at hand but already out of reach. His martial arts path was still there, but he had completely changed his martial arts philosophy. He was the strongest fire-flaming realm expert. In the past few years, as his physical state continued to decline, what he sought was the strongest explosive force. Just like the Wang family of Beihai. A genius who should have been at the top of the divine list had no hope of reaching the invincible realm in his life. After all his unwillingness and anger gradually turned to peace, Fireman had only the determination and firmness to play his part. Outbreak at all costs. Fireman's fist slowly opened. This simple action seemed to use up all his strength so that it was extremely difficult for him to open his 5 fingers. The fist turned into a palm. The sun gathered on Fireman. In a flash, the fire as bright as the sun burned all over him. He aimed his outstretched palm at Jiang Qinyan and shook it slightly. There was peace in the air. Suddenly, in front of Jiang Qinyan's bursting domain, a huge and terrifying palm print nearly a kilometer long appeared. The palm print was just a shadow, but it was condensed into a substance by the raging fire. The glacier, which had been torn apart by the aftermath of the fight between several masters, hit the palm print. Large pieces of ice surged and burst. The solid palm print almost covered the sky and the earth, completely enveloping all of Jiang Qinyan's domains. No! Jiang Qinyan, who stood only by his obsession, suddenly roared. Everyone was in action. The phantom sword intent and the yin-yang sword intent surged like a sword river, and the sharp sword energy gathered in the palm print. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud, who were not good at frontal attacks, also broke out with all his strength. Li Tianlan stood in front of everyone, his figure like a sword. He locked the whole space and kept retreating, getting farther and farther away from Jiang Qinyan. Jiang Qinyan's last roar finally fell. The power of the dying counterattack of the invincible realm between heaven and earth exploded directly in the flaming palm print with each finger like a skyscraper. The incredible and violent power completely shattered the space. The fingerprint trembled under the impact of the power and collapsed completely in an instant. Ice, hurricane, flame, and thunder. Everything became transparent and turned into the pure power of destruction. Like a tsunami, it rolled into the sky and rushed toward Li Tianlan. Looking forward from Li Tianlan's point of view, the monstrous power rolled up the raging tide, boiling and spreading in the air. As the raging tide passed, the glacier condensed by tens of thousands of troops had completely melted. The sun shone down, but there was no light. All the light was absorbed by that power and turned into pure cold and darkness. Such momentum was simply earth-shattering. But the surging and majestic outbreak was blocked by the palm print for a moment. The moment was very short. But in a very short time, it was full of vitality. Li Tianlan's confined space kept retreating. His entire person had completely turned into a sword. The sword light was unsheathed, and its sharpness was shocking. The torrent of destruction of the world completely covered Li Tianlan in an instant. Amidst the coldness and silence, there was only a sword light swaying in the air. The sword light was unusually weak, like a candle in the wind, but extremely tenacious, like the most eternal light in the darkness. The world was destroyed and everything turned to ashes. Only one sword still existed. The confined space no longer retreated. The weak sword light standing in the front completely blocked all the power of destruction. The majestic power washed the sword light, rolled back and washed again. The sword light swayed and rose in the darkness and kept going up. The light became smaller and smaller in the darkness, but it became more and more dazzling. In the long, seemingly eternal darkness, the inextinguishable light suddenly became the most awe-inspiring sword energy. The sword energy condensed into a bundle. The silver blade of falling stars was completely carved in a dark void domain. The light was rising, expanding, and finally rising to the highest point. It was like a dazzling star in the darkness. The stars suddenly rotated wildly in the highest place of the darkness. The dark power surged wildly with the rotation of the stars. The whole darkness had been completely shrouded by the sword intent. It was a completely strange sword intent. It was not vast, heavy, or turbulent. There was only coldness and sharpness. There was only tearing. This sword was different from the heaven-cutting move, sea-breaking move, and shattering move. However, this imperfect sword became the most suitable sword to break the stalemate. Sky-splitting move. The dark tide continued to shatter under the rotation of the stars. The destructive power all over the sky was completely transferred to another direction under this sword. In the sudden loud noise, the rotating stars stagnated for a moment. Then the flowing fire suddenly appeared in the darkness, tearing the darkness and silence. The flowing fire and the stars burning in the darkness fell at the same time. Or the darkness was rising. The darkness began to surge wildly. There was a sound between heaven and earth, and a shrill wail came from all directions. The light began to reappear. Vaguely, the people who were blocked by Li Tianlan finally saw the young leader. He was still holding the silver long sword, but his body was completely unbalanced, and he fell from the sky with blood splashing. Cool Breeze's figure flickered and appeared directly beside Li Tianlan. He reached out to catch his body and fell to the ground. The white cloud silk clothes were completely broken again. Li Tianlan, who was covered in blood, held the sword in one hand and crushed a button on the inside of his white clothes with the other hand. Code name of the potion: Natural Healing. It was one of the most advanced gene potions developed by Jianghu State. It was extremely rare but extremely powerful. This was a real life-saving thing. It might not be as good as the Immortality potion, which could increase vitality and longevity, but the healing function of natural healing was not much different from that of Immortality potion. It was just that the Immortality potion increased vitality to heal the body's injuries, so that people could return to their peak state in the shortest time, and it was a complete recovery. But the function of natural healing was to extract the vitality of the injured and could only temporarily restore the injured to the strongest state. However, this temporary period of time was 3 days. 3 days of peak time was enough for Li Tianlan to do a lot of things. Li Tianlan poured the powder in the button into his mouth and swallowed it with blood. He looked at Jiang Qinyan's position. But Jiang Qinyan had disappeared. In his line of sight, there was only a cloud of dust that was blown away by the wind. The gray dust drifted in the air and eventually returned to dust. The invincible realm had fallen. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and turned to look at Fireman. The effect of the natural healing began to spread. His body was now perfect, and he had drunk a whole set of Immortality potions. His recovery ability was incredibly strong. Under the effect of the natural healing, his spirit began to gradually recover, and his pale face also had some color. "Old man," Li Tianlan called out in a hoarse voice. Fireman, supported by drifting cloud, was on the verge of collapse. His physical state was already declining. In the pursuit of full strength, it meant that he would immediately lose all his combat effectiveness after a real blow with all his strength. "I won't die. I'm just temporarily out of strength." Fireman shook his head, his voice reluctant. He leaned on drifting cloud and looked elsewhere on the battlefield. The sacred and solemn memorial square in Reki City had become a complete mess. In sight, blood, corpses, and broken ice almost occupied everything. Li Tianlan's fourth sword intent was called Sky Splitting. This sword was not yet perfect. But while tearing the sky apart, this sword also led the power of Jiang Qinyan's dying counterattack to fall in all corners of the square. He couldn't take this sword. The only thing he could do was to lead it. So the final result of this sword was equivalent to Jiang Qinyan's dying power, Li Tianlan's full blow, Fireman, Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, Yin and Yang Phantom, and everyone else's full blow fell on the square. There were troops in every corner of the square, and they were countless experts of Reki City. This blow might not kill everyone, but the ice layer built by the army had completely disappeared. Among the countless corpses, many of the injured were groaning and struggling. As far as the eye could see, the whole square was full of broken corpses and blood, full of wailing like hell. Hell in the sword. There were few people left standing on the whole battlefield. Li Tianlan watched it all calmly. There was only a kind of coldness and indifference in his eyes that chilled people's hearts. "Get out of here right now," Li Tianlan said. "Heal first." "And then?" Fireman asked, raising his eyebrows. "And then?" Li Tianlan glanced around. Jiang Qinyan's final move was called Living with Heaven and Earth. Living with Heaven and Earth. Heaven and Earth were silent. Judging from the result in front of them, the world of Reki City was really going to be silent. Li Tianlan smiled. His smile was peaceful, but with his face covered in blood, he looked indescribably ferocious and crazy. "Then go to the Rekvia family," he said calmly. Genius 1 second to remember this site address. Mobile version. Chapter 418. Everything had been planned long ago. The premise of the plan was that everyone had absolute trust in each other's strength. Li Tianlan believed that Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, the two sword masters of Mount Shu, and Fireman could destroy all the elites of the Jiang family of South America stationed in Reki City in the shortest time. And they also believed that Li Tianlan had the strength to fight with Jiang Qinyan. Jiang Qinyan had to die. The Jiang family of South America had to withdraw from the game in Eastern Europe in the shortest time with scars. In Jianghu State, on the way and when he was about to reach Eastern Europe, Li Tianlan had been thinking. He had sorted out all the information he could get in Eastern Europe. The conclusion he got was simple. At least during the period when the Snowdance Corps had just entered Eastern Europe, Li Tianlan could be sure that he was safe. He knew how important the information that Qin Weibai used to threaten the Wang family of Beihai was. That information might not be a sharp weapon to sink the economic giant ship of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was enough to put that giant ship in jeopardy. There were a lot of problems pointed out in that information. Every problem could be said to be a secret of the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai would not touch him until those problems were solved. As for Kunlun City, with Gu Xingyun seriously injured, Kunlun City had lost much of its spirit. At least for now, Kunlun City was following the footsteps of the Wang family of Beihai in dealing with the Li family. Li Tianlan was not sure how long it would take for the Wang family of Beihai to solve these problems, but he was sure that Eastern Europe was safe for him in the beginning. Safety meant space. Li Tianlan really needed some space to do something. The Jiang family of South America was one of his main goals, and Jiang Qinyan was the beginning of the whole plan. That was why Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, Yin and Yang Phantom and Fireman ambushed in this square. This was the place they had originally planned. It was located in the center of the city, about the same distance from their respective battle sites. Li Tianlan was a little farther from here, but it was just enough to ensure that when he attracted Jiang Qinyan, others could ambush here. So it became the most likely place to kill Jiang Qinyan. Of course, Jiang Qinyan had the right to choose not to come. But Li Tianlan, who had successfully escaped, also had the ability to rush out of Reki City and sweep all the elites of the Jiang family of South America and Wulan State with several high-level members of the Snowdance Corps. But Li Tianlan was sure of his value. He was sure of his value to the Jiang family of South America, the Wang family of Beihai, and Kunlun City. The beginning of this plan was not complicated. He trusted his companion's abilities. Trust your own worth. Therefore, the entire plan had enough possibilities. Jiang Qinyan's death was bound to shake the whole dark world. Li Tianlan could not grasp the attitude of the Jiang family of South America. But for him, he was here, and the Jiang family of South America had only two choices: either retreat or die. This so-called plan was so abrupt, and there were countless risks and variables behind it, so it seemed extremely reckless. But Li Tianlan knew very well that if there were no accidents, the beginning would be the time when his will was the freest in the entire Eastern European chaos. Only at this time could he truly do what he wanted to do without any scruples. Perhaps all of this was urgent. However, the burden on his back did not allow him to remain silent any longer. So what if he was a little anxious? Every story needs a beginning. If controlling the Snowdance Corps was only the beginning of his ascension to the high-level stage of Jianghu State, then the action against the Jiang family of South America and Eastern Europe was the prelude to his sprint to the peak of the Dark World. He had only 3 days. Everything had to be solved in 3 days. In addition to being fast, he had to be fast. Jiang Qinyan's death was silent and earth-shattering. When the news of his death began to spread out of Reki City and Wulan State, Li Tianlan and others who had deliberately lost contact with Jianghu State had moved to an old apartment not far from the city center. The natural healing drug was extremely effective. In less than 2 hours, Li Tianlan's internal and external wounds had become completely stable. Li Tianlan, who had returned to his peak state, walked out of the room. Several other rooms in the apartment were still silent. In the battle in the square, Jiang Qinyan's final performance fully explained what the real invincible realm was. The gap between the top of the holy list and the bottom of the divine list had become blurred under the dying counterattack. If Fireman hadn't tried his best to stop it for a moment and Li Tianlan had resisted it by himself, no matter how powerful the natural healing potion was, it would not have allowed Li Tianlan to recover his ability to move now. That was the style of living with heaven and earth that almost killed everyone. After all, he underestimated Jiang Qinyan. But such underestimation was good and bad. Jiang Qinyan's last move was extremely powerful, but they survived. The move of living with heaven and earth was drawn to the army of Reki City by the sky-splitting style. Under the explosion of infinite power, Reki City lost at least thousands of elites who could immediately join the battle. This was undoubtedly beneficial to their next plan. A balding, ordinary European man sat in the living room of the apartment. His body was straight. When he saw Li Tianlan coming out, he subconsciously stood up, looking extremely cautious and serious. Li Tianlan waved his hand and motioned him to sit down. How did the outside world react? He asked directly. The news of Jiang Qinyan's death has spread. However, we have yet to receive any feedback from the major powers. Everyone is currently focused on another matter. The European man was no longer young. He was in his 50s, but his face had a natural seriousness and caution, making him look a little old-fashioned. He glanced at Li Tianlan. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Your Highness, you are in trouble now. In other words, your Snowdance Corps has hemp." How annoying. Wulan State and 2 nearby countries have listed Jianghu State as a hostile country because of your action. Wulan State announced an hour ago that it had cut off diplomatic relations with Jianghu State. Oh, the busiest one is the United Nations. The United Nations is holding a meeting. Most of the powerful countries in our impression are attending this meeting. At present, even Snow Country's attitude is moving closer to Wulan State. He spoke Chinese very fluently. After saying the most important information, he paused. When Li Tianlan had almost digested it, he whispered, "Now the whole world is waiting for Jianghu State's explanation." "And Jianghu State?" He looked into Li Tianlan's eyes and said, "Waiting for your explanation." Li Tianlan was silent, as if he had never responded to Jianghu State without saying a word. For the time being he remained silent, and Jianghu State could only remain silent. "What's your name?" Li Tianlan asked suddenly. The middle-aged man stood up again, bowed slightly and whispered, "Gandalf. Your Highness, my name is Gandalf Guard." Gandalf Guard. About 5 years ago he entered Wulan State from Germany to do the catering business. His business was neither good nor bad. It was ordinary. His personality and his restaurant were the same as the apartment he owned. On the surface there was nothing special about them. But in fact, in terms of seniority, Gandalf's seniority in the Samsara Palace was no less than that of some supermasters who joined the Samsara Palace later. In the Samsara Palace, he was one of the few people whose name could be remembered by all the high-level officials. The secondary intelligence chief in Eastern Europe. He was responsible for the intelligence collection of several countries in Eastern Europe, with Wulan State as the core. In the unknown but extremely sophisticated comprehensive assessment of the Samsara Palace, Gandalf was also one of the few 5-star intelligence officers. Li Tianlan had little contact with Qin Weibai. But since he became the commander of the Snowdance Corps, he had gradually come into contact with some of the core secrets of the mysterious organization, Samsara Palace. In the case that he temporarily cut off contact with Jianghu State, Gandalf's existence was equivalent to his eyes, as well as the source of logistical support and intelligence. Gandalf? Li Tianlan nodded. He repeated, "Well, Gandalf, according to your analysis, where is the bottom line of Jianghu State?" Gandalf was silent for a while. "It's impossible to judge at the moment. It depends on the pressure that the major powers put on Jianghu State. Wulan State has defined your action as a war between Jianghu State and Wulan State. All the major powers now have a reason to intervene. Your Highness, it's not easy for you to be in Jianghu State. If you ask me, instead of guessing where Jianghu State is, it's better to investigate how much Jianghu State trusts you," Gandalf said slowly. Li Tianlan was silent for a long time. They were actually asking the same question. Jianghu State could not choose to go to war with the whole world. In the face of the pressure from all countries, when Jianghu State could not bear it, it would inevitably abandon Li Tianlan. If Jianghu State did not trust him, it might even make this decision earlier. What Li Tianlan had to do was to reverse everything in Wulan State before Jianghu State made the decision to abandon him. What he had to reverse was more than his own disadvantage. It was the situation of the entire Wulan State. This was a real upheaval. "As expected," Li Tianlan said blandly. "But the situation is not necessarily optimistic." Gandalf reminded him. "It's not that bad." A voice suddenly rang out. Fireman, whose aura was still a little weak but stable, walked out of the room and said quietly, "Jianghu State can still give us 2 or 3 days. 2 or 3 days. Li Tianlan's peak would only last for these 2 or 3 days. Once the time was over, he would have to recuperate. Such a situation could not be said to be serious or easy. It could only be summed up by Li Tianlan's words just now. It was expected. If this trip to Wulan State was successful, he and the Snowdance Corps would directly establish enough prestige in Jianghu State and the Dark World. If they failed, there was no explanation. There was no need for any explanation. It was like a big gamble. It looked thrilling. But Li Tianlan had enough chips in his hand. Li Tianlan silently felt the strange feeling of really standing on the cusp of the storm, and his heart was full of mixed feelings. "Enough." He suddenly glanced at Fireman and asked, "Old man, how are you? Can I be worse than you?" Fireman snorted. At that time he limited his strength to the real limit of the fire-flaming realm and did not lose to Li Tianlan. Now 3 years later his state had declined, but his explosive power was more sufficient. Although the old man was old, he was still confident. Li Tianlan chuckled, and his eyes gradually became relaxed and warm. In the desert prison he had been with Fireman day and night for more than a year. From childhood to adulthood, apart from Li Honghe and the veterans of the Li family, Only Fireman had been with him the longest. Confirm Schenker's location. Li Tianlan suddenly glanced at Gandalf and said calmly, Jiang Qinyan was dead. The patriarch of the Rekvia family, who was supreme in Wulan state, was their next target. Gandalf nodded and began to dial the phone. Now we have to find more than Gandalf. We have to worry about another person. Fireman suddenly glanced at Li Tianlan and said, Jiang Qiansong. He and Jiang Qinyan are not biological brothers, but their relationship is better than that of biological brothers. Little heir died here. He will come here as soon as he gets the news. Fireman paused and suddenly asked, I heard that there was a black ghost in the dark world in recent years. Well, Black Ghost is a code name. He is the leader of dozens of tribes in Africa and the guardian deity in the eyes of African locals. Li Tianlan thought of the information he had received and said slowly, I heard that the Jiang family of South America planned to set up a death training camp in Africa to compete with the Wang family of Beihai in Africa. At present they should have achieved something. Fireman muttered to himself. Li Tianlan glanced at him and seemed to think of something. He laughed and said, Old man, what hatred do you have with the two brothers of the Jiang family of South America? There was something wrong with Jiang Qinyan's reaction when he saw you. I taught them a lesson. His father came to apologize to the Li family. The two brothers called me uncle. Maybe they were not convinced. Fireman said casually. That's it? Li Tianlan's eyes were suspicious. It must be more than that. A voice with a strong smile sounded. Han Chongyang, the Yin and Yang sword master of Mount Shu, came out with a smile. Elder Fire, is there any gossip you haven't told? When Zhang Er saw you just now, it was as if he had seen the enemy who killed his father. How could he be like that when he called him uncle? Fireman groaned. He felt a sense of helplessness that a good man didn't mention his past achievements. At the same time, Reki City International Airport. The flight from South America to Eastern Europe slowly landed. A middle-aged man about 50 years old stepped off the plane with a black man. The middle-aged man's appearance was not outstanding. He had a relatively ordinary face, slightly dark, but his eyes and temperament were extremely calm, even gentle. There was no fierce aura around him. His words and deeds were extremely gentle and casual. On the other hand, the black man standing behind him was like a sharp long sword, surging with a strong murderous aura. In the early morning of August 8 in Eastern Europe, in the absence of any warning circumstances, Jiang Qiansong, patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, cooperated with Black Ghost, the guardian deity of Africa. They arrived in Eastern Europe. Wulan state was a little cold. The airport of Reki City was even colder. Jiang Qiansong walked unhurriedly. He had just gotten off the plane. The news of Jiang Qinyan's death had not reached his ears, so he acted very casually. Master, who should I kill? Black Ghost asked in a somewhat stiff Chinese. The Jiang family of South America was rooted in South America, but they insisted on speaking Chinese within the clan. Even all the retainers of the Jiang family of South America needed to master Chinese. Kill a lot of people. Jiang Qiansong narrowed his eyes and chuckled. Those who are enemies of the Jiang family of South America deserve to be killed. His voice was calm and gentle. Black Ghost nodded and said stiffly, They deserve to be killed. When everyone thought that Black Ghost was an ally of the Jiang family of South America from Africa, no one ever thought that the famous Black Ghost was just a slave of the Jiang family of South America. It was impossible for an invincible realm expert to appear out of thin air in the dark world. Any invincible realm expert had cause and effect. If you couldn't see cause and effect, it could only prove that there were things in the world that you couldn't control. The Jiang family of South America set up a secret death training camp in a mountain range in Africa decades ago in the name of a school. For decades, out of tens of thousands of Africans, no more than 10 could come out of the death training camp alive. The number was small. However, every single person who came out of the death training camp was a true expert. But among so many people, there was only one invincible realm expert, Black Ghost, who was poured with countless blood. Jiang Qiansong didn't feel sorry. It was good to have one invincible realm expert among tens of thousands of African pariahs. From the day Black Ghost broke through to the invincible realm, Jiang Qiansong was sure that he would become his most powerful assistant and even partner. So in the decisive battle of Heaven Capital 3 years ago, after Jiang Qianxia was killed and the murderous weapon, the Legend of Qin, was lost, Jiang Qiansong sent Africa to summon Black Ghost. Black Ghost's strength was not strong. In terms of comprehensive strength, Black Ghost could probably hover in the top 10 of the holy list. But in terms of attack power, his attack was fierce and could even directly rank at the bottom of the divine list. His biggest weakness was defense. Jiang Qiansong, on the other hand, was best at defense. Jiang Qiansong now ranked 10th on the divine list, and he had a code name that was not pleasant to hear. Black Tortoise. Turtles were good at defense. As the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, although his strength was not high on the divine list, he was recognized as the best in the world in defense in the Dark World. He and Black Ghost. One for offense and one for defense. Plus Jiang Qianyan. The Jiang family of South America sent 3 Invincible Realm experts to Eastern Europe this time, and they were Invincible Realm experts whose shortcomings could make up for each other. Jiang Qiansong walked out of the airport and looked up at the rising sun in Reki City. The light of the morning sun fell on him, so bright and beautiful. Jiang Qiansong suddenly felt that he was standing very high, so high that he could see the whole world. 3 Invincible Realm experts, countless elites, the foundation behind Eastern Europe and trustworthy allies. Jiang Qiansong laughed. At this moment he had no idea why he would fail in this mess. Not at all. He stood quietly at the airport and felt that he was so powerful. It was the feeling of being in control of everything. He stood here and ruled the world. In the shabby apartment in Reki City. Fireman finally couldn't bear the casual questions, but Han Chongyang became more and more serious. Cool breeze and drifting cloud had gradually recovered. Yun Qinshi also walked out of the room. When the Yin and Yang sword master of Mount Shu asked Fireman about his past with the Jiang brothers for the umpteenth time, Fireman finally told the truth of that year. His appearance was ordinary and dull, and when he told the truth, he seemed extremely sincere. At the airport, Jiang Qiansong stood alone and ruled the world. Inside the apartment, Fireman scratched his sparse hair and said helplessly, "It's really nothing. It's just that the 2 brothers said that my urine was delicious." Genius 1 second to remember this site address. Mobile version. Chapter 419. Snow Country Mormons. In the deep polar night light, Flaming Fire walked quickly but steadily into the villa hall and handed Qin Weibai a copy of the latest information sorted out by the Eastern European Intelligence Department of Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai was playing chess with Lin Fengting. Mormons was a small town that was lively but not very prosperous. However, in the afterglow of the polar night, there was still a lot of entertainment in the city that was enough to make people forget home. Lin Fengting was not interested in these things. When he was not traveling far, he liked to play chess. Qin Weibai catered to his taste. Neither of them had low chess skills and they were evenly matched. So in the past few days the 2 had played many games of chess in their spare time. Today they were playing Go. The black and white pieces moved on the chessboard step by step, and the game was exquisite and grand. When Flaming Fire walked in, the game was coming to an end. Qin Weibai did not look up or take the information. She just calmly placed a piece and said softly, "Read it." Flaming Fire paused and lowered her head to open the information. There is still no news about Mellad, the second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps. Flaming Fire glanced at the information as quickly as possible and said something that Qin Weibai had been paying close attention to recently. Qin Weibai's delicate and sharp face lines were as calm as water, dreamlike and illusory. The United Nations has officially held a meeting. Star State, France, England, Snow Country, East Island, Japan, Germany. So far, nearly 20 countries have asked Jianghu State to explain the actions of the Snowdance Corps in Reki City. Flaming Fire reported calmly, "Of course, Wulan State is also included." "Be more specific." Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows. Flaming Fire unhurriedly reported the names of nearly 20 countries. From the perspective of the world, this was undoubtedly an extremely luxurious lineup. Not all countries were developed countries, but every participating country was a real power in terms of comprehensive national strength. So many countries targeted Jianghu State at a meeting. After the meeting, God knew how much pressure Jianghu State's diplomacy and military would bear. "What about Jianghu State's reaction?" Qin Weibai asked. "Still silent." Flaming Fire said. Qin Weibai nodded and slowly put down the black chess piece in her hand. The white chess pieces in front of him had almost filled up the entire chessboard, but the black chess pieces were still not at an obvious disadvantage. The black dots on the chessboard were extremely exquisite and strange. In the face of the aggressive white chess pieces, they still seemed to have the majestic power to fight back. Flaming Fire continued to read the information and suddenly said, Jiang Qinyan has been confirmed to have died in Reki City. Reki City is in chaos. He had no psychological burden at all. At the moment he got the news, Lin Fengting wanted to go to Reki City. With his strength, Jiang Qinsong's so-called best defense in the world was just SOSO. Without the legend of Qin and Black Ghost, Lin Fengting really did not feel any pressure. Considering a certain variable, even if he could not kill Jiang Qinsong in an accident, he could at least make the Jiang family of South America completely withdraw from Eastern Europe, and even completely withdraw from the Dark World in at least a few years. Lin Fengting was ready to make a move. Qin Weibai shook her head and said softly, "After all, he has to rely on himself for some things. I can't always be by his side to protect him. He needs to walk his own path. I've already done everything I can do for him. Tianlan already has enough chips. Wulan State is a game he played for the Jiang family of South America. So what if I let him finish it?" Lin Fengting's eyebrows twitched. He knew Li Tianlan's whole plan. In fact, 2 days before departure, Li Tianlan had more chips than everyone expected. The power of Samsara Palace and the power of the Dongqing clan on the surface and in the dark were all handed over to Li Tianlan for the chaos in Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan also set his goal in Wulan State with the chips in his hand. The whole plan was simple, huge, and extremely violent. But at the same time it was very beneficial. Samsara Palace and the Dongqing clan only provided power, but they did not interfere with Li Tianlan's plan. Li Tianlan was in charge of everything. Perhaps when Li Tianlan was unwilling to be dormant and did not dare to be dormant because of the responsibility he bore. Samsara Palace and the Dongqing clan were also anxious to let Li Tianlan grow up in the fastest time and take charge. Lin Fengting understood Li Tianlan's ambition. He also understood the expectations of Samsara Palace and the Dongqing clan. But this was not the reason why they chose not to take action when Li Tianlan was in danger at this time. Jiang Qinsong came too fast. In Li Tianlan's plan, Jiang Qinsong arrived in Eastern Europe at least 48 hours earlier than planned. During this period of time, every minute and every second was a variable. I don't doubt Tianlan's ability. But the chaos in Eastern Europe is too big and Tianlan's starting point is too high. It's good if he succeeds. If he fails, you see the current situation. Lin Fengting looked into Qin Weibai's eyes. Nearly 20 powerful countries put pressure on Jianghu State together. No matter how strong Jianghu State is, it also has a bottom line. Once they think that the pressure they are under has exceeded the value that Tianlan brings to them at this stage, even if Dongqing Wudi can persist, including the academics, they will declare Tianlan's treason and deprive him of the commander of the Snowdance Corps, so as to get rid of the pressure they are under. Qin Weibai continued. "Have you thought about the consequences?" Lin Fengting asked. "If the Li family bears the charge of treason again?" "I didn't think about it." Qin Weibai looked down at the chessboard in front of her. "Minister Dongqing's persistence is meaningful. In addition, I'm only used to considering the worst consequences. At present, Tianlan has a lot of cards in his hand. No matter how bad the situation in Wulan State is, even if he fails, he can retreat unscathed in the worst case. Then why should I consider other things?" Lin Fengting smiled bitterly. Once the plan of Wulan State failed, would Li Tianlan retreat unscathed? Did Qin Weibai really regard the Jiang family of South America, the Wang family of Beihai, and Kunlun City as paper tigers? Once the situation got out of control, maybe Li Tianlan and others could escape Jiang Qinsong's pursuit. But how could the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City let go of this opportunity? With the pressure that countries put on Jianghu State, they would try their best to define Li Tianlan as a traitor who violated the position of Jianghu State. No reason was needed. The major powers put pressure on Jianghu State. The Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City put pressure internally. Jianghu State had to give up Li Tianlan. It had no choice. If Li Tianlan failed, he would bear these consequences. How could he return to Jianghu State then? If he couldn't go back to Jianghu State, retreat unscathed? Tianlan may be able to leave Wulan State alive, but if he fails, the entire Li family. Does the Li family have anything to do with me? Qin Weibai suddenly laughed. She raised her head and looked straight at Lin Fengting with her bright and dreamy eyes, with a kind of sharp but extremely fragile coldness. "I remember I told you that I don't like the Li family. I don't like Li Honghe either. I didn't help the Li family. From beginning to end I was just helping Tianlan and him. It had nothing to do with the Li family. In my opinion, the Li family is a burden that Tianlan carries. It's best to get rid of it. Even if Tianlan is charged with treason this time. As long as Dongqing Wudi insists, he can still control most of the Snowdance Corps, and he doesn't have to bear the restrictions brought to him by the rank of marshal. In this case he can really make a difference in Eastern Europe. Tianlan has space to move. Why should I consider the Li family? Why should I consider the Li family? Lin Fengting was silent for a long time before he smiled bitterly. So you didn't intend to let Tianlan complete his plan from the beginning. From the beginning you wanted Tianlan to commit treason, get rid of the shackles of the Li family in the Snowdance Corps and get more space in Eastern Europe? No. Qin Weibai shook her head. I gave him all the chips that Tianlan could use. I also hope that he can succeed. But even if he fails, he has a way out. That's all I want to say. As long as Tianlan is safe, I won't save the Li family. For me it doesn't make sense. If you want to talk about the Li family at this time, the Purgatory of Heaven capital should have entered Eastern Europe. You should have more common topics to talk about with God about this. Lin Fengting smiled bitterly again. Qin Weibai herself couldn't tell how she felt about the Li family. It was not complete hatred. But she would never have a good impression of him. Such a complicated feeling eventually turned into complete indifference. Talk to the Purgatory of Heaven capital? There was no need to ask how the Purgatory of Heaven capital felt about the Li family. But the problem was that from the perspective of the Dominator, he only had hatred and resentment for Li Honghe. Lin Fengting's eyes were complicated. His former friend had become so strange now, as if he had become another person. How to talk. But from the bottom of his heart, Lin Fengting still didn't want the Li family to be completely destroyed. But even if he persuaded Qin Weibai, he could only start from Li Tianlan's perspective. If you stand by and do nothing about the Li family, if Tianlan fails, the Li family will be doomed eternally. Although all this is because of his ambition, if he knows that you have the ability to save the situation and doesn't make a move, he may not have a knot in his heart for you. Have you ever thought about this? I'm right. Qin Weibai's eyes were soft and stubborn. The Li family has nothing to do with me. What about the Lin clan? Lin Fengting suddenly asked. You once said that among all the forces only the Lin clan deserves your trust. You don't believe in Li Honghe, but you believe in me. What? Qin Weibai's eyes flickered. Her eyes were crystal clear and bright with distinct black and white. But at this time, there was a touch of extremely complicated light, which seemed to integrate all emotions. Her voice lowered. Because the Lin clan once accepted a disciple. That was why she could trust the Lin clan. Lin Fengting was a little confused. But then he seemed to think of something as if he suddenly understood a problem. He is your... Clap. Qin Weibai threw the chess piece on the chessboard. The chess piece hit the center of the chessboard and the sound was clear like the sound of a sword. I'm tired. Qin Weibai stood up and walked out of the hall. When her figure was about to walk out of the door, she suddenly paused and asked, Sir, do you know which army is the most elite in Jianghu state in the past 5 years? Was the army. Not the army. Lin Fengting thought for a moment. Qin Weibai asked about the past 5 years, not now. If we go back in time to 5 years ago, it would be a miracle. The most elite army in Jianghu state was undoubtedly the Border Control Corps. It was the same now. But the most elite army in Jianghu state was the Thunderbolt Battalion, which was directly under Dongqing Wudi in the Border Control Corps. However, the Thunderbolt Battalion suffered heavy casualties in the war when the 5 superpowers invaded the border more than 3 years ago, and was handed over to the Wang family of Beihai by the Dongqing clan. Finally, the Tian'an Freedom Corps was established. Although the original elites were still there because of the expansion of the scale, the good and the bad were intermingled. After all, they still lost the demeanor of the strongest army in Jianghu state and even in the world. You mean the Thunderbolt Battalion? Lin Fengting asked. The Border Control Corps, the Thunderbolt Battalion. They were the elites of the elites selected from the army of nearly 5 million in Jianghu state. There were a total of 20,000 people in the Thunderbolt Battalion. Although they were not outstanding individually, when they formed a whole, an army of tigers and wolves? That was the real army of gods and devils. Qin Weibai did not answer Lin Fengting's question, but repeated what she had said just now. So Minister Dongqing's insistence is meaningful. If the nearly 2 decades of Jianghu state were divided into countless chessboards. For the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, that game of chess was over after the treason case was settled. For the Dongqing clan, their game of chess had just begun when the treason case was settled. The Dongqing clan had been preparing. Dongqing Wudi and Dongqing Hongguang placed a chess piece more than 3 years ago. He placed his chess piece with a calculated move. This chess piece was now given to Li Tianlan, and he put it on his own chessboard. Who could break the game? Don't worry. Qin Weibai said the last sentence. She moved forward slowly, left the hall, and finally walked into the cold night. Please remember the original domain name of this book. Divine Emperor of Nine Heavens mobile version. Chapter 420. Around 10 o'clock in the morning. All the TV stations, mobile phones, and the internet in Reki City released the same news at the same time. Wulan State officially severed diplomatic relations with Jianghu State, listed Jianghu State as a hostile country, and declared war on Jianghu State. All the people of Jianghu State in Wulan State were listed as unwelcome and had to leave Wulan State within a time limit. The president of Wulan State and the prime minister issued an order in the name of the government that all the citizens of Reki City should not go out. The TV station repeatedly played the bleak picture after the war in Reki City Square. The square, which had an extraordinary significance in the whole of Wulan State, was in a mess. The ice that had been completely torn apart by the sword intent had not completely melted. Blood was spilled everywhere. Countless corpses and injured people lay on the ground, which had not been dealt with yet. The image began to zoom out, and the outline of the entire city gradually appeared on the TV screen. Tall buildings, streets, cars, as well as the surging and endless crowd. All the military and police forces that Wulan State could mobilize began to disperse to every corner of Reki City. The host in the news was telling in a heavy tone about the losses that the terrorists of Jianghu State had brought to Reki City. The series of numbers became even more shocking after they were converted into economic losses. The whole world seemed to be denouncing the evil deeds of Jianghu State. The high-level meeting of Wulan State was not over yet, but some orders had been transmitted directly from the conference room to the entire Wulan State. The siege plan was officially launched. This was the highest-level military order in Wulan State. The order covered all the armies in about 16 cities around Reki City. In the next 72 hours, nearly 80,000 troops from Wulan State would set off from different cities and eventually surround Reki City. The host promised that he would make Jianghu State pay the price. It was said that Wulan State had received reliable news that the culprit of all this still had not left Reki City. Once the personnel of the siege plan were in place, nearly 100,000 troops would surround the entire city. The so-called terrorists of Jianghu State would definitely not be able to escape. It was also because a few vicious terrorists were still hiding in Reki City. That was why the government of Wulan State asked the people of Reki City not to go out for the sake of their lives and safety. The TV was on in the shabby apartment. Li Tianlan quietly stared at the picture on the TV. Gandalf used his fastest speed to translate the content of the news sentence by sentence for Li Tianlan. Fireman stood in the corner of the room, silent. Cool breeze and drifting cloud. Han Chongyang and Yun Qinshi sat opposite each other. Everyone had recovered to their peak state and were waiting for the next step. What do you think? Staring at the TV screen, Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Nonsense. The yin-yang sword master of Mount Shu, Han Chongyang, laughed. His hair was white and even his eyebrows were white. He was a man who loved to laugh and communicate. It's just a way to create pressure. Breaking off diplomatic relations was true, but declaring war? If they really wanted to declare war, why would they be so high profile? Wulan State used this tough statement to put more pressure on Jianghu State. The declaration of war had already been shouted. Next, there was naturally a question of which side to take. At the United Nations conference, almost all the powers demanded an explanation from Jianghu State. But it's just an explanation. Jianghu State is silent. Do they dare to bite us? But the declaration of war is different. Wulan State's declaration of war against Jianghu State is tantamount to giving the powerful countries a legitimate reason to intervene in this matter. The powerful countries only asked for an explanation before, but now they can basically denounce Jianghu State. The pressure on Jianghu State will naturally be greater. Wulan State's move is very beautiful. The others did not make a sound. Not making a sound was tantamount to acquiescing to Han Chongyang's view. Li Tianlan's gaze seemed to fall on the army surging and roaring in the TV, but his eyes did not have the slightest focus. The useless heaven and earth drawn by the sky-splitting move caused unprecedented damage to the entire Reki City. A large number of troops and even a large number of experts were all turned into ashes under that move. Now Reki City was seriously short of power. In other words, if they wanted to leave Reki City now, it would not be difficult for them to rush out. But Li Tianlan had never considered this problem at all. The besieging plan was to besiege their vitality. But in fact, what blocked Li Tianlan and the others was the overwhelming pressure of public opinion in the world today. Things had changed dramatically in just a few hours. Li Tianlan succeeded in killing Jiang Qinyin, which was definitely a victory. But in the current situation, this victory was even more illusory than his sword intent. Li Tianlan had expected this scene. But once the picture he had imagined many times in his mind became a reality, the strong conflict still made him a little uncomfortable. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. Things had come to this. Although they were not facing a desperate situation, they were in a dangerous situation. Under the promotion or direct control of the Rekvia family, Wulan State's attitude was extremely tough. They defined Li Tianlan and the others as terrorists. Now Li Tianlan and the others were probably terrorists in the eyes of all the major powers in the world. Things had come to this point. They would either overturn and forcibly change the existing concept of Wulan State, or they would be helplessly given up by Jianghu State, which could gradually not bear the pressure. One step further and the world would be more open. One step back and the abyss would be thousands of feet long. Retreat? There was no retreat. There was no way back. So Li Tianlan had never paid attention to the so-called besieging plan at all. Now even if they could leave, they could not clear their identities. Jianghu State did not dare to accept them either. At the very beginning they had a huge and quite risky plan, and now it was just the beginning. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and sent a text message. After waiting in silence for only 2 or 3 minutes, there was a quick response from the other end of the phone. Li Tianlan looked up at Gandalf. In his whole plan several people were the key. Jiang Qinyin was dead and they had succeeded in this step. Next, if they wanted to reverse the whole situation, relieve the pressure on Jianghu State, and even let Jianghu State benefit from it, the next key person would become more and more crucial. Sync Rekvia. Gandalf was also looking at his mobile phone. His face was a little ugly, and he didn't even notice Li Tianlan's hint for a while. What's wrong? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and asked. Your Highness, I think you should change your plan. A strange look flashed across Gandalf's face. He subconsciously glanced at Fireman in the corner and continued, I have received the exact news that Jiang Qinsong, the patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, has now arrived in Reki City, and with him is Black Ghost. Jiang Qinsong. Black Ghost. Everyone was moved for a moment. 2 invincible realm experts, and they were invincible realm experts who worked together seamlessly. Even if Jiang Qinsong had drunk Fireman's urine when he was young and said it was delicious. But the invincible realm on the divine list was the invincible realm on the divine list. If Fireman didn't go to 9 States prison, he might still have the combat power to crush the 2 brothers of the Jiang family today. But how could there be so many ifs in the world? Jiang Qinsong and Black Ghost joined forces. At least for now, their team didn't have the power to compete with them. For the first time, there was an accident in the plan. Li Tianlan frowned and whispered, Why is it so fast? Coincidence. Gandalf said with a wry smile, We don't have high-ranking spies inside the Jiang family of South America, and we can't know their plans. Jiang Qinsong didn't know that Jiang Qinyin had died before he came. His original purpose of appearing here was not to avenge Jiang Qinyin. Of course, it may be different now. He should have known the news of Jiang Qinyin's death. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and was silent. The situation in Reki City had become more and more lively. The Jiang family of South America, Wulan State, Jianghu State. Although there were only 3 aspects now, a series of things had happened in just a few hours. How chaotic and lively would the whole Reki City be next? Time ticked by. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone again. This time, instead of sending a text message, he dialed the number directly. The number was quickly connected. A warm and low voice sounded. Your Highness Li Tianlan? It's me. Li Tianlan said calmly, There's a change of plan. I want to meet you in advance. Because of Jiang Qinsong? The man on the phone asked. Yes. Li Tianlan's tone was brief. He's with Black Ghost. The voice on the phone said, I can't stop him. My people and I will try our best to contain Jiang Qinsong. Black Ghost is yours. Li Tianlan said. The voice on the phone hesitated for a moment. Maybe, he said slowly, we can contact Mr. Lin. Li Tianlan held the phone with a sneer on his face and did not speak. The other end of the phone also fell silent. Well, I'll leave as soon as possible. After a long time, the voice on the phone said slowly. Li Tianlan said, Don't worry. Maybe there will be other forces involved in Reki City after they react. When there are more people, there will always be variables. I don't like a lot of people. The man on the phone gave a wry smile. I'm the opposite of you. Li Tianlan smiled and said, I have a lot of warriors. Real warriors, so I like a lot of people very much. He hung up the phone and found Li Zhonghu's number. The moment the phone was dialed, he hung up again and sent a text message instead. There were only 4 words in the text message, straightforward and powerful. Full speed ahead. Li Tianlan's expression was still calm. After doing all this, he raised his head and glanced at Gandalf, who had been staring down at the phone. Within 2 hours, I want Shankar Rekvia's position. His tone was calm and tough. Such an order could be said to be unreasonable, but it also showed the urgency of the situation. Gandalf nodded with a serious face. I will try my best. Li Tianlan looked at Fireman and hesitated. Say what you want to say. Fireman said calmly. Act separately. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said, Old man, you take the 2 sword masters to follow Jiang Qiansong and Black Ghost. All of Gandalf's forces will fully cooperate with you. When necessary, I hope you can contain them for a while. Fireman and the 2 sword masters. To contain 2 invincible realm experts. This was indeed a very difficult task. Even with the cooperation of Gandalf and the elites of Samsara, this process was not easy. But Fireman nodded crisply and said, Don't worry. Li Tianlan had spent a long time with him. Every time Fireman said he could rest assured, Li Tianlan would be very relieved. He looked at Fireman seriously and said solemnly, Don't force yourself. Keep in touch. Now in the whole Reki City and even the whole Wulan state, only Jiang Qiansong and Black Ghost could pose a fatal threat to him. He would deal with Shankar Rekvia. But he had to know the dynamics of Jiang Qiansong and Black Ghost. If he met Jiang Qiansong in the process of chasing Shankar, the whole thing would become extremely troublesome. At the critical moment, Li Tianlan needed someone to delay the time. Even 1 minute could change the situation of the battle. Moreover, by mastering the position of Jiang Qiansong's movement, Li Tianlan could also better choose his own pursuit route. With Fireman following Jiang Qiansong at the critical moment, both sides could take the initiative to create many possibilities. Initiative. In this situation, Li Tianlan only wanted to take the initiative. He accelerated the pace of the whole plan and also tried his best to grasp the initiative. This task could only be handed over to Fireman. Only he and the 2 sword masters of Mount Shu could barely complete this task. Li Tianlan turned to look at Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. You go to the headquarters of the Rekvia family. I will let you know when it's time to take action. Li Tianlan said. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud's deterrence in the Dark World was far greater than that of an ordinary half-step invincible realm expert. But they were assassins and they were only at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Such strength could play a role in the battle of the invincible realm, but the risk was too great, especially since their ability was not a frontal attack. At this time, it was most appropriate to put them in the headquarters of the Rekvia family. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud nodded. Fireman Yin Qinshi Han Chongyang. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud. The 5 people were divided into 2 groups and left one after another. Prepare a car for me. Li Tianlan lit a cigarette and glanced at Gandalf. It will definitely satisfy you. Gandalf smiled respectfully. He didn't even ask Li Tianlan what he wanted. Shankar's cell phone suddenly vibrated. For a moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Shankar's cell phone. Shankar glanced down. Shankar just entered Senator Joseph's manor. Shankar raised his eyebrows and suddenly said, Let's go. Li Tianlan stood up without hesitation. Shankar put down his cell phone and took Li Tianlan downstairs. The elevator went all the way down and finally entered a hidden underground garage. The garage door slowly rose. A silver-gray off-road vehicle without a logo but 2 times larger than an ordinary off-road vehicle appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. Fierce, tough, cold and wild. This was the first time Li Tianlan had seen an off-road vehicle that suited his taste so well. Lehrman alloy body, explosion-proof, bulletproof, top-notch collision capability, twin engines, equipped with carbon monoxide acceleration, a maximum speed of 400 km per hour, can launch 4 Hurricane virus missiles, code name Beast. Your Highness, this is the most suitable tool for you. Gandalf said with a smile and handed the car key to Li Tianlan. Very good. Li Tianlan nodded and opened the door to get on the car. The car started and the roar of the twin engines suddenly sounded. Keep an eye on Shankar and report his position at any time. After saying that, Li Tianlan stepped on the accelerator. The off-road vehicle code-named Beast suddenly roared, and the body, shining with a metallic luster, rushed out of the underground garage and out of the apartment community. The sunlight over Reki City gradually faded. Dark clouds gathered. With the roar of the engine, it began to drizzle all over Reki City. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.